Hello everyone, and welcome to another amazing story. What if Izuku was in Konosuba? This amazing story was written by Magnus9284. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. Green Unleashed. Ila was having trouble reaching a solid opinion about her new party leader. On one hand, she hated him, having seen her beloved Kyuya humiliated by the underhanded tactics of the green-haired druid filled her heart with dark thoughts. On the other hand, she couldn't help but to admire him as he had a devotion to his party members rarely seen before, showcased by how he had taken to heart knowing them, not just their strengths and weaknesses, as well as planning for all contingencies the party might face in the field. Unlike Kyuya, who hardly remembered her name, much less her class and skills. Ila also noticed certain similarities, like both male leaders being surrounded by an all-female party. Unlike Kyuya, though, the young druid seemed aware of the feelings of his companions, and had accepted them. She had mixed feelings about this. Kyuya seemed to avoid any level of romance when she and the thief were together, but had agreed to take her to his tent in the night, while the other girl wasn't present. The mental image of the other girl getting the same treatment made her shiver. "So, what class are you?" Izuku asked to the pinkette, bringing her back to the present with a start. "If you have a specialty you need to tell me too. Having the right tools and equipment is key out there." The pink-haired girl grumbled a little bit, not knowing if she was still upset about being questioned, or pleased at being noticed and considered part of the group. "I'm a ranger." Ila's answer was barely loud enough to be clearly understood. She noticed the puzzled expressions of the druid and his party, getting flashbacks to the day she met Kyuya. Back then she was ready to do anything to impress the hero, to claim him as her own. The thief had more to show though, flaunting not only her feminine assets, but her skill at lockpicking, stealth, trap disarmament and appraising. The only thing she could present was her ability to recognize the properties of plants she touched, and never get lost, in the wilds. "Another expert of the wilderness then?" Darkness asked, making the pinkette wince. Redundancy is what most likely made Kyuya choose her as the sacrifice, and it would probably lower her worth for this party too. The druid was obviously a much better choice as an expert of the wilderness than she'd ever be. "What about the specialty?" the diminutive arch-wizard asked, to which the pinkette averted her eyes. "Something you are good at?" There were things she was good at, of course, but she wasn't better than anyone else. "I have good dexterity." Ila began, voice growing fainter as she tried to continue. "I can set basic traps, and cook simple things." She was level 15. She should have been better at her specialties. Maybe even reach an advanced class? Traveling with Kyuya had hurt her growth. She was aware of that now. But at the time that didn't seem to matter at all. She and the thief had no need to do other things than field support and carrying light loads, setting camp, and being praised for their moral support. Kyuya had done almost everything on every quest they had taken, from killing the target to destroying impossible obstacles. She doubted the druid would settle for a cheerleader. "A sniper then?" Izuku asked, showing a kind smile that made the pinkette grimace. "We can certainly benefit from range support and someone who can actually cook." The druid had great expectations of her then? "I agree." The little crimson demon added, making the girl in question feel bad. "Someone who can shoot arrows at things that escape our crusader will be great." "No one has ever passed me." The blonde crusader suddenly said, startling Ila as she thought some rebuttal would come. "It would be great to eat more things than berries when out in the field though. No offense, but jerky is not the best way to eat meat." Ila couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't an interview to get into a much-desired party. This was a review of her skills to survive the burden she so foolishly took from Kyuya's shoulders. "Wait!" Ila's shout got everyone's attention, including those outside the party. "I can use a bow, that's true," the pinkette said as she began to fidget, "but I need time to line up the shot, and I get easily tired of holding the arrow in position." Ila felt the eyes of the druid's party land as one on her, so she looked down before continuing. "I can set traps." The voice of the ranger was becoming even smaller, "but they can only hold tiny animals." Tears began to form at the corners of her eyes, feeling completely useless against a party that had to be top-notch in order to have been able to defeat the great Kyuya. "And I barely know how to make sandwiches and juice." Ila, without needing to look at the druid, could tell that she would be sent to the market to sell things at some random stand. Perhaps being used as an extra waitress at the guild if lucky enough. In her mind and heart she knew she was to blame for her mediocre skill set, that she should have trained, even if Kyuya didn't need the help. "I see." Izuku spoke, taking a thinking pose. "A crossbow should help you then." Ila blinked in confusion. She wasn't expecting support or understanding of any kind. The rest only needs to be trained with time and patience. Izuku's judgment had been surprisingly kind. Seeing the rest of the party nod in acceptance was also quite the oddity too. "Izuku!" Izuku. Megumin suddenly called for their attention, with sparks on her eyes. Why don't you design a crossbow for her? A weapon created by Master? The black harpy asked in her whispery voice, still making the skin of the pink-haired ranger crawl. That's going to be awesome. I can make the blueprints. Izuku replied, trying to downplay his skills, but I'll have to commission it with the dwarves. That statement confused Ila. The only ones who could make better bows than the elves were the druids, as they could command the wood and the cord to take any shape and have any features they wanted. Making crossbows should have been within the skills of this particular druid too, so it made little sense to commission such a thing with the dwarves. Getting a mess kit would be useful too, Darkness added, her mind quickly remembering that while raw natural food was good, cooked meals were still better to her. No offense, but having proper cooked meals would be great if we get on a prolonged mission. I can only make sandwiches though. Ila repeated in a low voice, trying to avoid setting high expectations. None taken. Izuku replied with a smile before he got serious. Now to address your accuracy problem, Darkness. The smile that was adorning the face of the blonde crusader disappeared, now replaced with a grimace. About an hour later, behind one of the blacksmith shops, in a small zone designated to test weapons, the young druid and his party members were gathered. Twack! Ila fired a light crossbow, scoring a rather decent hit on the target ahead. This is actually easier to use than a bow. The pinkette muttered as she reloaded the weapon, less tiresome too. Twack! Firing another bolt, and getting slightly closer to the very center of the target, she began to remember all the times Kuya told her to take it easy and practice with the bow, to take her time, because he really didn't need her to grow fast. That, and he didn't need help fighting. Seeing her aim getting better, she couldn't help but to question Kuya's wisdom. I know I told you that I love being humiliated. Darkness' voice forced the ranger's attention to shift away from her own training, but I refuse to use something so unrefined. The blonde crusader no longer wielded a well-crafted long sword. Instead, in her left hand she was wearing a large round shield, while her right hand held a wooden club. Both items made by the green-haired druid. It's just for a test, Darkness. Izuku replied in a placating voice, your weapon of choice requires you to allocate skill points into accuracy due to its finesse and martial attributes. Maces and clubs only require your strength to be effective. The young druid seemed so meek that Ila couldn't help but to wonder how Kuya lost to him. As a crusader of Eris, I must maintain an image of elegance and discipline. Darkness began to say in a solemn voice, just to start waving the club in her right hand wildly, this is just barbaric. The club she was wielding wasn't just a shaped piece of wood. Izuku had created it by growing one of his vine whips, giving it an ergonomic handle in addition to a uniformly and balanced hardened body that grew towards the head in a perfectly symmetric shape, all covered in wicked thorns, spread about in regular intervals and geometric patterns. And the shield? Darkness continued, this time hitting the shield with the club, creating a powerful sound that left little doubt about her strength. How am I supposed to enjoy being hit while wielding one? The shield was made with two hardened vines that had been coiled into themselves, giving it a rather beautiful spiraling pattern. The wicked thorns that littered the front and edge gave it the brutal and barbaric look that the crusader seemed to dislike so much though. Ila blinked a couple of times, trying to focus on the type of plant used to make the items. Darkness, you are a crusader, you are supposed to use a shield. Izuku's voice carried wisdom and kindness to a level the ranger was not used to hear. If you don't want to use it to protect yourself, then at least use it to protect those weaker than you. Wait! Ila's voice suddenly caught their attention, is that iron bark? I think they look good on you, Darkness. Megumin raised her voice, masking the question of the ranger, since they look menacing, only the strongest will try to hit you. As Darkness started to murmur about new possibilities for her, Ila began to notice that, indeed, the shield and club were made of iron bark, just not the one carved by elves, but one naturally grown. That meant that the young druid was far more capable than he seemed to be. Fine! Darkness nearly shouted, a blush adorning her face as she felt like becoming the laughingstock of the guild for using such crude-looking weapons. I'll give this setup a try. But if it doesn't work, then I'm returning to my long sword. For just a moment, Darkness held an aristocratic visage that was borderline arrogant. It disappeared when Liza stepped in front of her. Darkness raised a brow in honest confusion, unable to read the stoic face of the gator girl. Is something the matter? Darkness asked, sounding rather neutral, much to the surprise of the pink-haired ranger. Do you need something? 1 second, that was all Darkness got to ready herself for a strike. Liza, quick as a flash, had raised her massive tail, spun on her feet, and slammed the scaly appendage on the blonde crusader, who instinctively raised the verdant shield. Boom! The sound of the resulting collision had been so strong that the owner of the smithy had come out to check on what had happened. "Oi!" the dwarf shouted in distress, "no breaking my weapons without buying them first." Taking a moment to calm down, he and the rest of the party looked at what actually had happened. The shield had withstood the impact, and darkness had been pushed back a couple of inches. The blonde crusader was actually looking shyly over the shield, wide eyes looking at Liza with a rare glint. Ela didn't know what was more impressive. If the fact that a wooden shield had withstood such a brutal impact, or that the tail of the gator girl was still unscratched after colliding with such a brutal-looking shield. "Master, strong," Liza said, pointing at the shield. "You, say thanks." While obviously her way of showing off her master's providence, Izuku couldn't help but to think she was a little overzealous. He was still going to scratch her chin in a show of appreciation though. Darkness looked from her shield arm to the gator girl. That had hurt, a lot. "Liza!" Darkness shouted as she saw that the albino had turned to walk to her master. Liza's unreadable face turned to look at the crusader, and Ela thought for a moment that the aristocratic girl was about to demand compensation. A lowly demi-human had attacked her after all. "Do it again," Darkness added as she began to breathe in an unsightly way. Ela was dumbstruck by the scene. "Chica thinks Blondie is wrong in the head." The black harpy quietly spoke in her raspy whispers, even if everyone was able to hear her, "That is not right." Izuku only gave a nervous laugh, happier to see that the shield had actually worked much better than intended compared to anything else. "Chica is not wrong," Megumin seconded, although she actually looked afraid. That was enough to shatter the bones of a bugbear chieftain. Ela knew that such a feat would be deadly for an unprotected human. Worse still, she could tell that the reptilian albino hadn't used all of her strength. That fact meant that her bite would be far more deadly. That also meant that the thief had gotten off easy. This demi-human could have torn her to pieces in the blink of an eye. "Emergency! This is an emergency!" All the loudspeakers around the city flared up to life at the same time, broadcasting the message of the guild. The announcement also interrupted what Izuku's party was doing. "All able adventurers, and everyone capable of fighting, head to the main gate immediately. I repeat." As the distressed message began to repeat, Izuku exchanged glances with everyone. None seemed any less confused than him. A minute later, at the gates of Axel. "Who was the knave who destroyed my fortress?" Izuku and company watched in stunned silence as the headless knight screamed in outrage at the assembled adventurers, many of which were trembling in absolute horror. They were looking at an undead powerful enough to stand before them in the middle of the day. "Where is the imbecile who rained fire upon my lair without having the decency of introducing themselves?" Murmurs full of fear were blooming here and there, no one sure what the powerful undead before them could mean. Then, among the murmurs, some people from the guild recognized the figure accosting them. It was Beldia, a general of the Devil King. Izuku felt a knot forming in his stomach. The undead mentioning a destroyed fortress sounded too close to home to his liking. One quick glance to his petite arch-wizard companion was all it took for him to understand that he and his party were to blame. Megumin was doing everything in her power to look away. "If you don't come out," Beldia continued shouting, getting to the point of hysteria and rage, "I'll raze this town to the ground, and add every soul to my legion of the damned." Fear and despair washed over every adventurer present. The threat was way too real, and most of the adventurers hadn't seen a challenge this big in their entire lives. Only the high-ranking adventurers could claim to have enough strength to face a general of the Devil King. Megumin was trembling. This had to be her fault. There hadn't been any fortresses destroyed in a blast since she tested her new spell, which means that it had been her big bang that caused this development. Steeling her own resolve to shoulder this in the most glorious way possible, she took a step forward. Just to be stopped by Izuku's hand. "Mr." Izuku called out, voice slightly wavering due to the panic of both getting the attention of such a foe, and the lack of a plan. "Mr. His body had moved without thinking, again. Not that he regretted protecting Megumin and his girls, and his friends, or the whole town. "Ah?" Beldia seemed taken aback for a moment. "Beldia. I'm Beldia, General of the Devil King." Izuku finally noticed that the headless knight was actually holding his own head with one hand. "And who approaches me?" The question of the powerful undead threw Izuku for a loop. He almost expected to have to evade an attack. "Me?" Izuku allowed his nerves to show a bit. "I'm Izuku, a novice druid." There was a moment of silence as both undead and druid stood there, watching one another. Izuku knew that this enemy was way stronger than anything he had faced before, that he was not ready for combat on this level. Beldia was now slightly wary. The Devil King himself had warned him and the others to not take druids lightly, because no one knew when the world itself would come to their aid. "Maybe if you explain what happened." Izuku continued when he saw that there was no open hostility, at least for now, we could help you. Another moment of silence filled the field, everyone waiting for the response of the fearsome undead. Beldia began to speak, and then, his demeanor seemed to change, may have started off on the wrong foot here. Izuku blinked in surprise. Certainly I was going overboard for a moment there, how unsightly. Beldia lamented, much to Izuku's surprise, but you have to understand that losing such a perfect fortress, let alone the resources I had stored there, without receiving a proper challenge is incredibly rude. I can imagine. Izuku conceded, and then he remembered that he knew who the culprit was, and that he had helped her. Day after day after day I had to return to my fortress just to find new holes and scorched walls. Beldia began to narrate his woes. One little girl dressed in red was suddenly at the side of the druid, and was very quick to interrupt. That was my fault? Megumin shouted, surprising everyone, especially Izuku. I had to practice my explosion magic, and that big and hard thing was the perfect target. That was you? Beldia roared in anger. Did you even check before firing away? I did. Chika flew by the side of her master, earning winces from everyone, even the Dullahan. Chika flew over the castle every time. Chika added, returning to her raspy whispers, there were only dumb skellies there, not even a wand weaver to order them around. Izuku moved without thinking again, pushing both petite girls behind him. You three are together? Beldia asked, for a moment remembering the time when he was a chivalrous knight, full of love for his maiden, a love betrayed in the name of a dumb religion. 3 heads nodding were enough of an answer for the undead general. The eyes full of determined love in the face of the young druid more than enough to drown his ire. So, bombarding my castle was the result of my butler not being out in the open. Belida lowly said, going unheard by those reunited, I understand. I'll forgive you this time. Izuku let out a loud sigh of relief, and then he saw the Dullahan pointing at him while leveling a stern glare his way. But you better keep your girlfriend on a short leash. Beldia's words made the druid and the arch-wizard blush, and make your slave search more thoroughly next time. Chika pouted, but otherwise said nothing. I still intend to leave with the head of the idiot who blew up my castle, though. Beldia's next words froze everyone. But we already... Megumin began to raise her voice. I'm not talking about your petty explosions. Beldia interrupted with a shout. He may have been enchanted by the image of these 2 lovebirds, but he was going to get revenge. Izuku quickly covered Megumin's mouth before she could say too much. My home was not destroyed with explosion magic. Beldia clarified, gaining the attention of the adventurers. I was returning from my previous lair, carrying precious heraldry and decorations so that my new castle would be up to the standards of a general of the Devil King's army. Beldia knew very well each and every piece. Portraits, large pictures and statuettes of a nude woman he knew all too well. Heartwarming pieces of pure art that made him feel alive, all of them now turned to dust. There was a light, intense and hot. It erased the entire terrain, incinerating everything in its way. Beldia explained, leveling a deathly glare toward the adventurers, I was sent flying for a few miles away. That was the power of a relic weapon, and I want the fool that used it against my home. Megumin was unsure if she should feel honored that her Big Bang spell was considered in the same category as the power of a relic weapon, or insulted at not being given the credit for such a level of destruction. Wait, was that Kyuya? Murmurs began to erupt again. Must have been Kyuya, he is the only one with a relic weapon in this town. The murmurs became louder, easily heard now by the Dullahan and the druid. Must have been pissed off by losing that duel. While Izuku was against the very idea of blaming someone else for his mistakes, this time he considered it a tactical decision. The blonde swordsmaster was not in the vicinity, which meant that the Dullahan would not have his battle today. At most, he would issue a challenge to the guy, to which Izuku would later apologize and even offer his assistance when going to fight this formidable foe. I see. Beldia's voice commanded silence, so the imbecile has a name. Where is this fool now? Something in the Dullahan's voice placed Izuku on edge. The undead general wanted blood. I can answer that. Luna was the one to speak, showing that she was far more than just a guild attendant. Kyuya left town yesterday, taking an urgent quest near the mountain range. That was a lie, and Ila knew it. Her dear Kyuya didn't take any quests, she had asked, which means that he simply left the town to find wealth elsewhere. Izuku began to send his vines into the ground. One side glanced to Chika, and the black harpy tensed in anticipation. Ah, I understand. Beldia's cordial tone held a somber tinge to it. Your local hero was summoned to fix some sort of crisis. Izuku's vines had popped off at the feet of Liza and Darkness. Both powerhouses quickly understood that their leader was getting ready, and so should they. I guess I'll just have to make the fort near the river my new home. Beldia continued, directing his gaze toward Izuku and Megumin. Hopefully this time there will not be more unwelcome explosion training. The druid and the petite crimson demon nodded. Now is there anyone here who personally knows this Kuya? Beldia sweetly asked. I wouldn't want my message to fail to reach him. As one, hundreds of fingers pointed to a horrified Pinkette. The girl in question felt betrayed, and Izuku felt like the town had thrown one of their own to the wolves with no remorse. The novice ranger missed how a little vine poked out of the ground beneath her feet. Very well. Beldia was now directly looking at the horror-stricken girl. I want you to tell him that he has 5 days, starting from today, to go and face me at my new home, or else. The Dullahan lifted his free hand, now covered in a mass of darkness, pointing it at the girl. You will die. The undead general shouted as the mass of darkness shot from his hand, flying incredibly fast toward the unprepared girl. Then, a miracle happened. A wall of thorns shot up from the ground, intercepting the mass of darkness. The plant died instantly, leaving behind a dry thorny bush. Ela was now on her butt, staring dumbfounded at the plant that had saved her life. She didn't need high intelligence to know what had happened. This was the work of a druid. The ranger and the undead general turned to look at the young druid. The boy had the hood of his robe up, slightly hiding his face, leaving only glowing emerald eyes to be seen. I won't let you harm anyone. Izuku's voice resounded with power, something new for the group of adventurers watching this development. Now this is rare. Beldia said as he finally dismounted his headless horse, quick to take his massive sword in his free hand. I never thought that this city of beginners would house 2 heroes. Darkness and Liza moved to flank Izuku's sides, getting ready for a confrontation that was probably well above their rank. One was baring her fangs in barely contained rage, the other was brandishing a thorny round shield. Or perhaps, since the other boy left town after testing his weapon. Beldia paused, seemingly for dramatic purposes. It is you who is the true hero of this town. Beldia menacingly pointed his massive blade at Izuku. That was Chika's signal to act. Kuyuyui. Chika's exceedingly loud cry was enough to make all the adventurers and the Dullahan flinch. The black harpy used this distraction to grab Megumin with her talons, making sure not to hurt her, and quickly fly behind the wall of adventurers. That wasn't normal. Beldia muttered to himself, what kind of harpy does that? Kuya isn't here, so there is no need to fight. Izuku called to everyone's attention, still feeling bad for pinning this on the blonde warrior. Leave. Beldia snorted in amusement. A hero indeed. Beldia loudly stated, it'll be an honor to have your head instead. The real reason to reside near this town of beginners was to look out for a rising hero. The Devil King had felt the hand of the gods moving, which means that a potential hero had been chosen. Beldia felt it his duty to deliver the head of this wannabe to his lord. Of course, now that I have found a hero, Beldia narrowed his eyes, never losing sight of the druid, I will first break your spirit. From the shadow of the undead general, a horde of lesser undead warriors materialized, rotten carcasses with trapped souls that made Izuku feel sick. Now go, my minions. Beldia motioned for his troops to advance, go and kill everyone. Men and women, the children and the elderly. The Dullahan watched intently from his position, how the druid didn't move, not even turning around to look at the horde of undead. Not even when they all passed by his side, and the side of the strong women by his side. Why isn't he moving? Beldia's thoughts were answered when the undead horde passed a little behind his query. Shink! A massive spike came out from the ground, impaling an undead warrior, keeping it in place. Shink! 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 Then another, and another. Then 3 more and then 5 at a time. Soon the entire field looked like it belonged in Wallachia. You were casting this entire time. Beldia said in awe at the way his army had been obliterated in one attack, but how is it that you can cast World of Thorns? The spell the general mentioned was well known for being of very high level, something that only the leaders of the druidic circles should be able to do. That meant that this boy was even more dangerous than he thought. I'm not done yet. Izuku softly replied. Then all the corpses that were impaled began to grow flowers that gave a rather beautiful bluish glow. Those are mana eaters. Luna's voice carried over the field. Mana eaters were a rare kind of flower that only grew on sites rich with mana. They were highly coveted due to their mana-depleting properties, which helped to ease the rare condition known as mana sickness. Lucky gatherers could find a dozen of these flowers per year. Izuku had produced thousands of them in the blink of the eye. Beldia was starting to get concerned. I have to kill you now. While this spell, rare as it was, did not purify the undead like holy magic, it could destroy the anchoring that kept the souls bound to the undead bodies, releasing the souls out of his control. He couldn't allow that, that's why he leaped at the druid, fully intending to take advantage of the fact he couldn't move while maintaining this complicated spell. I will not allow it. Darkness shouted as she leaped between the two, using her shield to stop the massive blade. Bam! What in the world? Beldia shouted in disbelief as his sword bounced back from the wooden shield. A moment of silence took place as the general and the crusader stood against each other. Hey! Darkness shouted in disapproval, looking back at the druid. I hardly felt that. What? Beldia was taken aback by the words shouted. I've cleaved countless shields, both metal and iron bark made. How many gods bless that thing? Izuku wisely decided not to comment on the shield, instead focusing his attention on the battle. Liza, don't let that horse interfere. The order was said through clenched teeth. It was obvious to everyone that the young hero was concentrating on keeping the undead horde trapped. The headless horse he'd mentioned had begun to charge against Darkness, attempting to blindside the crusader. Liza was quick to tackle the creature to the ground, and then proceeded to tear it apart. It only took 1 second for the gator girl to turn the undead animal into bloody chunks of rotten meat. That's not normal. Beldia muttered to himself again. What is she? A dragonoot? After we are done here, I demand something that fits my needs. Darkness shouted as she readied herself for battle. Beldia decided to finish this girl at once, lest the druid complete whatever he was doing. It's time to end this. Beldia shouted as he launched his severed head upwards, where a fiery eye formed. Let's see if you can survive this. With that, the undead general launched his assault. With his head suspended in the air, he could see the battlefield with a much more beneficial perspective. This gave him an unfair advantage against warriors who attacked him, because he could see all their moves, and move accordingly. This time, however, he was facing a tank. The girl in question was not attacking. Instead, she solely focused on stopping his attacks, stubbornly preventing his body from reaching the druid. Slashes from every angle, forward lunges, even pommel strikes. Nothing could break the infuriating shield. Then his head finally fell down, right into his free hand. Ludicrous. Beldia shouted, this is supposed to be a town of beginners. Don't stop attacking me. The blonde crusader shouted, unhappy with the attacks no longer being directed at her. Then she swung her spiked club against her opponent, for the first time in the battle. Like that crude thing could. Beldia commented as he moved his enormous blade to block the wooden thing. Bam! And he stumbled back 2 steps. What? The incredulity in the voice of the undead general was only matched by the awe of every adventurer watching. What is that thing made of? The gathered adventurers were more amazed at the sight of Darkness actually hitting something. Darkness looked from the stunned Dullahan to her spiked club, and then looked toward Izuku. Izuku! Izuku, the blonde was unbelievably happy. I managed to land a hit. Feeling outraged for being ignored, Beldia moved to strike, only to feel killing intent behind him. It was on the level of a dragon. Greya! The raging warcry came from Liza, who had herself launched forward, ready to tear apart the Dullahan like she did the horse. What the? The Dullahan used both his instinct and combat reflexes to avoid getting grappled by the demi-human, but the girl had managed to catch his arm. Crunch! With her powerful jaws. Not normal. Beldia shouted on his mind. He was not unaware of the Gatorkin and their powerful bodies, but this girl, this slave, surpassed that level of strength by a lot. His arm guard was getting destroyed, and he couldn't shake her off. I'm almost ready. Izuku shouted, earning the attention of the Dullahan. Be ready to jump away from my spell. That was it. This was all to immobilize him, so the high-level spell couldn't miss. Too bad for the young druid, he still had one last card to play. Then, this will end it. Beldia ominously said, Vorpal strike. In an instant, the body of the undead general turned into dense fog, which darted towards the immobile druid. The Dullahan materialized right in front of him, far from the stupidly strong girls he was struggling with, and then plunged his sword into the chest of the meddling hero. Izuku! Darkness shouted, horrified by the sight of her charge being murdered before her very eyes. She was quickly drowning in guilt, but when she tried to move to avenge her leader, Liza's strong clawed hand grasped her shoulder. Looking back, she just saw the gator girl shake her head decisively. You were a worthy opponent. Beldia stated, reverting to his knightly tone, but your adventure ends here. Is that so? Izuku asked, quite unlike someone who had a massive sword impaling his chest. You sing victory when you are within my grasp? The mockery in the voice of the druid was the result of his well-planned strategy. What? Beldia nearly shouted. The hood moved slightly up, the green glow of the emerald eyes revealed itself to be fireflies forming tiny orbs, the head nothing but a mass of knotted vines. In fact, there wasn't blood on the sword. Instead, vines were starting to envelop the weapon, much to the distress of the Dullahan. Like hell, I'm allowing you to. The shout of the undead general died as he failed to jump back. Vines stronger than steel were holding his feet in place. He couldn't even remove his sword from the vines. When did he make the change? Beldia thought in distress as he kept struggling. The entire body he had been targeting was nothing but a mass of thorny vines all along. And he couldn't escape. The skill, Vorpal Strike, had a pretty long cooldown, meaning that he had no way to use it to move around. Worse still, he needed to be able to move his sword to activate it, which was impossible at the moment. One quick look around, and things started to become clear. In front of the gathered adventurers, the druid, without his robe, was standing at the side of the petite girl that the harpy had spirited away. That cry had been a powerful distraction, enough to allow the druid to dig below his feet to escape, and leave the plants behind as a decoy. A druid that thought like a rogue. That wasn't normal. "It's our turn, Megumin," Izuku commanded. "Of course," Megumin answered while striking up a pose. "Our combined might will pierce the heavens." It was a half-cooked plan. A druid and an arch-wizard were about to combine their spells in order to destroy an opponent that outclassed them. It was their only chance, because they lacked divine spells or a relic weapon to do the job for them. Mother Nature, ruler of life and death, heed my call and listen to my heart. Izuku began to chant, now kneeling down with his hands touching the ground. The first law of creation is destruction, and the end result of destruction is creation. Megumin's chant started as a sphere of light appeared before her extended hand, like a bubble containing the spell. "Take the chaos and ruin before me, crush it, break it, and consume it all." Izuku continued as the spikes that were keeping the undead warriors began to move, creeping closer to where Beldia was being held prisoner. "What is this?" The Dullahan was beginning to panic since this was a spell he had no knowledge of. "What kind of sorcery is this?" "The blocks of reality, atoms, gather before me. Smaller than a droplet in the ocean, yet stronger than the hardest metal, heed my command." The light on Megumin's hand changed its hue, taking on a shade that was now familiar to the undead general. "That light?" Beldia suddenly realized he had committed a terrible mistake. "Was it you? Throw it all into the spiraling cycle of life, twist it and mold it until beauty blossoms again." The large spikes came out of the ground, revealed to be connected to massive vines that looked more like trees. The spikes themselves began to glow with magic. Izuku had changed the properties of the enlarged thorns, allowing them to reflect back energy, an attempt at containing Megumin's spell. "No. Wait." Beldia really didn't want to know how the spell was going to end. "I'll leave. I won't bother you again." Clash against each other at speeds beyond speed. Shatter and unleash all the energy that created you. Megumin reached the climax of her chant, making the sphere look almost like pure liquid power. Izuku did his best to ignore the pleading undead. He knew better than to believe in someone who probably never gave mercy to his opponents. Exchanging one last glance with his petite companion, it was decided that the last part was going to be shouted together. Genesic Big Bang. Megumin launched her spell at the same moment that the giant vines began to encircle the undead general. The collision happened too fast for anyone to follow, and the light blinded everyone. The massive thorns worked as Izuku intended, keeping most of the detonation contained inside the zone where the vines were beginning to wrap into themselves to form a new tree. Part of the detonation still got through though, sending to the floor most of the adventurers. The light, however, was sent toward the sky, piercing the heavens as the petite crimson demon had declared. That was not a druid. Beldia managed to form one last coherent thought as his body was being destroyed at a subatomic level. He was pretty certain that no amount of magic would ever be able to put his body back together. The old gods are returning. The massive vines finally started to knot together. The light finally waned until it was safe to look again. The resulting image was something no one in Axel thought possible as the outcome of this battle. A giant tree was standing in the middle of the road. The trunk looked like solid gold from a distance. Large branches extended everywhere, covered in leaves that looked like platinum. The adventurers may not have been able to know what Beldia thought at the end, but most of them agreed that the young druid couldn't be normal. Fame and misfortune. It had been 3 days since Beldia attempted to attack the city of Axel. 3 days since the population of Axel witnessed one young and decidedly odd druid do the impossible. 3 days of non-stop gossiping about the green-haired adventurer and his entourage. Did you hear? Some say he got his powers from fucking with dryads. Really? No wonder he likes being surrounded by girls. Maybe he is the son of a dryad? Wait, so is he building a harem to create a new race? Outlandish rumors like those were not only spreading like wildfire, many adventurers didn't even lower their voices when the druid himself walked around the guild, much to the distress of poor Luna, who saw this as the perfect excuse for Izuku to abandon the city. No matter how bad the rumors got, one fact remained inescapable. Izuku had defeated a general of the Devil King's army. He was a hero of Belzerg and the hero of Axel. Making him flee would mean a massive blow to the city's reputation. It would no longer be considered the most rookie-friendly city of the kingdom, her life would become hell with all the resulting penalties. Oh, gods and goddesses! Luna whispered her prayer, suddenly remembering that maybe she should change pantheons, greater spirits of the land, let Izuku find grace within the walls of our city. Meanwhile, at a certain dwarven smithy. What do you mean that you're just a druid? Ila couldn't believe what Izuku had confessed. Up to this day, she'd had the firm idea that the Verdinet had been hiding his true class, that he was actually an arch-druid faking his status. In her mind, it explained his victory over Kuya, his weird magic, and his use of absurdly high-level spells. Learning that he had made an iron tree before the golden one where he buried Beldia had really cemented the idea too. It's just as he said, he is just a druid. Megumin replied for Izuku, still reading the notebook in her hands, as unbelievable as it sounds. Today, Izuku had finally came out of hiding, leaving the inn to finally interact with the town. The first day he holed up was mainly because he had absorbed mana from the undead to complete the combination spell that destroyed Beldia. This decision resulted in him learning that having such impure energy flowing through his body was very unhealthy and painful. When he entered the inn, after finally working the details of the reward with Luna, he simply fell face first on the bed in the room she had gracefully offered him and couldn't move until late the next day. The second day he was still working the soreness out of his body, with the healthy help from 3 cuddling girls, which led to him learning that cuddles and kisses truly had healing properties. And when he finally went out, he found that no one wanted to charge him any money, at least when food and lodging was concerned. If they were being grateful, Izuku appreciated it. He still held the idea that these businesses would just charge them later for their services when his reward finally arrived, which wasn't that bad all things considered. That reminded him he had yet to repair his customized robe. I don't get it. Izuku pondered with a concerned voice, how come combining skills is something outlandish? When Izuku tried to explain skill combinations, Ila had fallen into screams of denial, like his words were heresy. As if hearing that he had used only lesser skills, combined with enhancements, to recreate higher-level spells was like hearing that her religion was a lie. Megumin, however, had been extremely interested in learning more, and quite eager to learn about such power. Hence why she was reading the notebook in her hands. It's just not possible. Ila shouted once more, not even Kuya could do it. Izuku just gave an apologetic smile to the pinkette. It was hard to tell what was worse. That the poor girl was still trying to defend the guy that had abandoned her, or that she still saw that guy as a high standard to judge people by. Oi! Izuku! The owner of the smithy approached the group, carrying what appeared to be a metal mannequin. Here is the anti-magic target dummy. I want to see your girlfriend try to break this. Both Izuku and Megumin sputtered at his insinuation. Neither seemed ready to be acknowledged as an official couple yet. And yet, they didn't make any effort to deny the claim. Thing. Strong? Liza asked as she poked the mannequin. Don't toy with it. The dwarf reprimanded her, although no harsher than he would to any other client. This thing was made to deflect magic. It may be as good as mid-grade plate, but a brute like you may tear through it like tissue paper. Liza seemed confused by all the terms thrown her way, but Chika was quick to take her scaly hand and guide her away from the dummy. Izuku had decided that today was a good day to do 2 important things. Teach Megumin more useful spells, and commission Ila's custom crossbow. Both things, thanks to an innocent question, could be found at this particular smithy. Master asked for the dummy, so Megumin can test a new spell. Chika tried to explain to her fellow ex-slave, Chika thinks you need to not touch it. The dwarf shook his head as the black harpy's whispers still made him feel like something had scratched his brain. So, the dwarf called them to attention as he planted the dummy on the ground. What kind of super magic are you going to cast? Izuku couldn't help but wonder why this was so hard to understand. Why did people really believe that combining skills was impossible? Was synergy such an alien concept in this world? It's no super magic. Definitively not anywhere in the same league as my Big Bang. Megumin answered with a dramatic flair, finally returning the notebook to Izuku with a smile. The catch is that this is aimed at bypassing magical resistances. Izuku had requested this dummy for the sole purpose of testing a theory. Magical resistances reduce the effects of magic. That fact was a no-brainer. Throwing a fireball, even an explosion, on something highly resistant, or downright immune to magic, would result in only a waste of mana. But what if instead of being hit directly by the spell, the target was hit by a creation of the spell? Ha! The dwarf scoffed, giving a playful pat to the back of the dummy. Good luck then. This thing is made of enchanted, silvered mithril. The claim of the dwarf was high, but if true, then it really was nearly immune to magical attacks. Izuku doubted it would survive for longer than a second against the Big Bang, but testing that was a big no. You ready? Izuku asked to his beloved petite companion, remember to visualize all the components, okay? Don't worry. Megumin replied, showing a smug smile and a playful glint in her eyes. It was an odd request, and a rather complex chemical formula, but I memorized it. When Megumin had requested more combination spells a day ago, Izuku mentioned that it should be possible to combine 2 low-level spells and create something stronger than the sum of the separate spells. Megumin snorted when the spell she needed to learn turned out to be grease. Grease. A utility spell that created a gout of a greasy substance. It could be anything oily or greasy, really. From pork lard to lamp oil, the spell could conjure on a limited area nearby or at a distance. It could be conjured from the hand forward or on a focal point to create a puddle of the stuff to cover a portion of the floor. It was a fan favorite for parties that made liberal use of tactical retreats and on actual celebrations as a standard prank. Most favored among adventurers who had to make torches on the fly, or stingy explorers who didn't want to spend money on lamp oil. But it was not an attack spell. Chika, Liza. Izuku called to the demi-human girls, stay away from the dummy. We don't know how this will turn out. Chika and Liza obeyed, moving themselves further away. Ila followed suit, fully intending to use the massive albino gator girl as a shield in the case of a mishap. Izuku knew for a fact that greasy substances made for great fuel, meaning strong flames. The conjuration part of grease made the stuff real, which meant that if it were ignited, real flames would hit the target. Fire was not a torrent of mana, thus, theoretically bypassing the magic resistances. Of course, normal flames could still be resisted by fire resistances. That supposition led to a random thought. What if the substance was something not only flammable, but also toxic, sticky, and corrosive? Here it goes. Megumin warned as she readied the first part of her spell, creating fire. Ha ha ha. It's time to show how we, the Crimson Demons, can even manipulate the fires of hell. Megumin had decided to go full Chunny. The flame surrounding her hand wasn't meant to be thrown. Instead, it was designed to be the ignition method for the grease that was about to be expelled from a point just beyond her hand, but still touching the conjured fire. Like a flamethrower, or flamer. Burn in the eternal fires of hell. Megumin shouted as she pointed her open palm toward the dummy. There was no need to chant or name the spells, as they were very weak ones, Hellflame. For an instant, the flame surrounding her hand took on a deep blue tinge. Then, from her hand what erupted could only be described as a torrent of liquid rage. Brilliant blue fire streaked toward the dummy, licking it like a tongue out of the depths of hell. The spell barely lasted a single second, but the effects were obvious. The metal mannequin was set ablaze, blue flames sticking to it like napalm on a lump of flesh. It shouldn't have been possible. The dummy was magic resistant, and there was nothing in the metal to feed the flame, let alone ignite it. That is hellfire. Ila shouted in absolute distress, those are actual flames from hell. The pink-haired ranger shouted as she pointed at the burning dummy like she was witnessing heresy. It was hard for her to believe otherwise too, as the sheer destructive power she witnessed had to be demonic in nature, not the spell of a little girl. How? The hollowed voice of the dwarf was followed by the sounds of twisting metal. The dummy was twisting as it melted, producing sounds akin to screams of suffering and pain. Izuku! Izuku! Megumin was jumping happily in place, unable to avert her eyes from the terrifying effects of her new spell. It worked. It really did. Izuku chuckled, enchanted by the childish glee of the petite arch-wizard. Of course it did. Izuku replied, giving a head pat to the girl, coal tar is not only flammable, it burns hot, slow, and sticks to most surfaces. By adding sulfur to the mix, we get a different color of flame, in addition to highly toxic and corrosive byproducts that will pile up the damage. Izuku explained, just in time for a pungent, repulsive smell to reach their nostrils. Ila was quick to throw up, Chika and Izuku having covered their noses in reflex. Megumin and the dwarf seemed quite unfazed though. Smell, funny. Liza supplied, showing how little she was affected by the noxious smell. That's burning brimstone. The dwarf knew very well that smell. It was the smell that warned the dwarves they were getting closer to the gates of hell, and should stop digging. That is a mixture of hydrosulfuric and sulfuric acids. Izuku explained too, taking a few steps back from the almost molten dummy and the blue flames. That combination eats through metal with ease, and it's rather toxic. We may want to retire and let that mess burn. Ila didn't understand what the druid had said, but she clearly understood that the petite arch-wizard had created something horribly dangerous. Do you think Wiz is finished with my robe? Izuku asked, remembering how the beautiful yet highly customized cloth had been reduced to tatters during his fight with Beldia. I kinda miss it. Ila finally understood that everyone in the druid's party was dangerous. The druid himself could turn the most basic of the druidic spells into horrifyingly deadly skills. The arch-wizard, already dangerous for being a crimson demon, was learning impossible spells. The crusader was probably stronger than Mitsurugi, and she didn't even have a relic weapon at hand. Then there were the slaves. One with muscles harder than steel, and the other could weaponize her voice. What was she supposed to offer to this party of rampaging monsters to settle her debt? Ila. Izuku called, gaining the attention of the still recovering ranger. Come with us. The offer came with a smile and an extended hand that couldn't belong to such a monstrous character. The pinkette still took it though. She needed help to get up after all, not to mention that she really couldn't refuse at the moment. Where? Ila asked, slightly concerned. To Wiz's shop. Megumin replied for Izuku, we have to see if Izuku's robe is ready. We also have to gear you up. Izuku continued, earning a questioning stare from the ranger. Mr. Talanoff here has already accepted the commission for your crossbow. Now we have to get you some tactical gear to make full use of the weapon. Ila couldn't understand these people. She was drowning in debt, with anything she earned going to their pockets, and they insisted on giving her better gear. What kind of party leader was this guy? Not Kyuya, the great hero, lovable and fair, the same guy that abandoned her. All right. Ila finally replied, now standing up, and barely tolerating the foul smell of the burning brimstone. I don't know how I'm going to repay you for all of this though. While Izuku looked confused at the words of the pinkette, Megumin just rolled her eyes. The petite crimson demon knew now how Izuku operated. As an outworlder, his morals and sense of fairness worked on a different level. What others saw as giving too much, he deemed it as a fair trade for companionship. She, being the epitome of stubbornness, knew it better than anyone else. Izuku! Megumin! Darkness shout interrupted the moment. The crusader was running as fast as she could, earning worried stares from her companions. Did something happen? Izuku asked, feeling like this haste wasn't provoked by his reward arriving sooner than intended. A mage from Linden arrived at the guild hall. She is asking for Megumin. Darkness reported. Before taking on an even more serious tone, she demanded Megumin's presence, immediately. Izuku and Megumin exchanged worried glances. That didn't sound good. As the party departed to meet this mage, the dwarf continued staring at the molten slag, still burning that ethereal bluish tinge. Maybe I can use this hell-molten metal. Talanoff muttered to himself, yeah, it'll be used on that crazy crossbow? Never be said that dwarves didn't know how to recycle. A few minutes later, at the guild hall. As they traveled, Izuku was informed about what was happening. Mages from the College of Linden, located in the capital, were universally known to be the best mages on the continent. All useful magic was researched there, and if a new useful spell was created, it was expected to carry the name of a Linden mage. Magic created by crimson demons was usually tolerated, as it was not useful for mages outside the clan. Many of the spells in the Advanced Magic branch, as well as the dreaded Detonation branch, were created by crimson demons, and as such, were labeled as useless. Even the coveted Light of Saber was known to be just a waste of mana when compared to more traditional spells like Scorching Rays or Meteor Swarm. It made sense that Megumin would be called. Her Big Bang had updated the books, immortalizing her name by creating something terrifyingly powerful. But, was she being called for the sake of recognition? Or, you are late. A boy no older than Izuku shouted, looking down on Izuku and his party. You, the Crimson Demon. Lady Stella is waiting for you. Go inside the private room. The boy barked his orders, acting like he was superior to everyone in the guild. Izuku took notice of the odd orange hair and the vibrant purple robes. A wizard, who only needed a pointy hat to gain a role in a Disney movie. Doing his best to ignore such a mental image, Izuku and his group made their way to the private room, just to be stopped by the irate young wizard. Hey! The boy shouted now, you are meant to enter alone. No. Megumin replied flatly. What? The wizard freaked out, outraged at the rebellious attitude of the little girl. You must obey. No. I don't need, or have, to obey your etiquette rules. Megumin explained, subtly reaching for Izuku's hand in clear need of support. The Emerald Druid didn't hesitate to squeeze her hand. Among your hierarchy, you need to send letters with proper time to answer the summons. I got no letter and the request was too sudden. Obviously you think such are not needed because I'm not part of your collage, which also means I don't need to adhere to your rules for the same reason. The boy seemed ready to explode. The moment the young wizard reached for his wand, darkness and Liza sprung into action. The crusader had shield and club at the ready, standing firmly between the boy and the petite crimson demon, while the albino gator girl was already shielding both Izuku and Megumin with her body. Are all Linden mages this disrespectful? Darkness asked in obvious outrage, have your kin truly forgotten what it means to be part of the nobility? Darkness had taken a truly intimidating tone. Being nobleborn gave her a level of insight on the rules of nobility second to none, and that included the rituals of summoning and requesting. Linden's mages were considered nobles in some capacity, and just like nobles, they were known to abuse their authority in some regards. Their abuse of power, though, didn't excuse them from following proper etiquette. This forced summoning was rude, to say the least. The boy didn't know how to answer, but it was unnecessary anyway. Please, excuse the behavior of my little apprentice. Lady Dustiness Ford. A young woman, older than Darkness, but still in the bloom of her youth, interrupted the standoff. My student tends to get overzealous when dealing with this type of business. Darkness Visible winced when her family name was thrown out into the open. Izuku was not a naive boy. He could recognize the wrongness of the situation. This woman must be the so-called Lady Stella, and her eyes did not recognize the worth of anyone in his party, sans Darkness. So, she wanted to avoid trouble with the local nobility. Zack. Stella called to her apprentice, who stiffened immediately, apologized to this noble lady immediately. As if a switch had been punched, the boy fell to his knees and mumbled apologies. Linden's mages were treated like nobles, but they didn't hold any titles. Antagonizing the friend of a noble was tantamount to antagonizing the noble themselves. They obviously believed that Darkness could have invoked her rights as a noble to crush them into oblivion. I will let this go, as long as you remember to show proper manners. Darkness managed to pull off her aristocratic act, even if it was obvious to Izuku that it left a foul taste on her tongue. Now, please explain what this is about. The woman, Stella, failed to hide her twitching eyebrow. Of course. Stella replied with a fake smile, the arch-wizard and I need to discuss her spellcraft. As you may be aware, it is within our rights to have such a sensitive exchange in a private room. Darkness clicked her tongue. Spellcrafting and its secrets was one of the things that nobility had no claim on. I understand. Darkness conceded, then, after exchanging a small glance with Izuku, through her last punch, however, you must understand that she won't go alone anywhere, not without our party leader. And before you try to say no, he helped her to create that spell you are trying to understand. I see. The mage was very surprised by that information. Then please, follow me. But the slaves cannot enter. Especially that hideous harpy. When things had begun to look bad, Chika had jumped and perched herself atop the railings of the second floor. She wasn't shying away from conflict though, she was getting ready to attack like a bird of prey. To fall upon her target, and sink her claws deeply into whatever she deemed an enemy. Chika obeys master. The black harpy informed, eyes glowing like blazing coals with zeal, crazy mages are not Chika's master. Don't worry about her. Please, lead the way. Izuku said before things could deteriorate again, then she turned toward Megumin, before lowly whispering his next words, Liza may break through the door if anything bad happens though. Megumin chuckled as she followed the woman, who was totally unaware of how dangerous the party was. About 30 minutes later, inside the private room, Izuku learned even more of how twisted this world was. The Linden Collage of Magic had always been the one to claim ownership of all the most powerful and useful spells. There was no two ways about it. While most of the spell repertoire in the library was created by them, not every useful spell was created by them originally. When an upstart like Megumin created something radically different, powerful and useful, Linden's mages would reverse engineer the spellcraft, tweak it to fit their style, and then reclaim the spell as their own. Spells created by Crimson Demons were, as usual, completely ignored due to their unique circumstances. The Light of Saber spell was powerful, but it used so much mana and had such a large probability of misfiring that most sane spellcasters would never use it outside of special circumstances. Crimson Demons, on the other hand, had such large pools of mana that they could spam the damn thing like it was a trivial matter. Crimson Demons did not create good spells, that was the universal truth. But when they did, there was always a mage from Linden ready to steal the credit, so that such a truth remained unbroken. Lady Stella had the intention of doing so, but there was a rather big problem. How does this work? Stella asked with no small amount of annoyance. I spent a rather large amount of skill points to learn your spell, it gave me the knowledge of the formula to cast it, but I can't understand anything about it. In order to reverse engineer a spell, the caster must understand the knowledge behind it. Learning the spell gave the user the knowledge to cast it, sure, but not the intrinsic knowledge behind the principles of the spell. Knowing the spell, Fireball, gave the caster the knowledge of how to mold and channel the mana to shape the energies into reactive fire, but not the knowledge of how mana changed the nature of the air to create said fire, nor how it primed the fire to explode upon contact. that had to be learnt at the collage, upon reading massive tomes on magic theory. Megumin's Big Bang used knowledge not found in any book in any school of magic in the entire world. While that didn't stop other arch-wizards from learning the spell, there was no way to properly understand the principles behind it. This meant that for all intents and purposes, there was no way to steal the credit of such a spell. That meant that Megumin, a crimson demon, had beaten the Linden collage of mages. What the hell is an atom? How are they the blocks of reality? Stella continued her interrogation, looking more stressed with each passing second. How can something move at speeds beyond sound? How can a block of reality shatter? Nothing here makes sense. Seeing the woman start to freak out was getting harder on both Izuku and Megumin. They were fighting against the urge to chuckle. For Megumin, this was the greatest victory she could ever have, to have such a renowned mage begging for her knowledge. For Izuku, it was rather fun to see how his knowledge of physics and chemistry was causing someone quite the mental breakdown. Seriously, if this happened with just that, then what would happen if he taught Megumin even more complex things? Would she be able to unleash a supernova? Create a miniature black hole? The mage suddenly slammed a quill and parchment onto the table. The collage of Linden will have this knowledge. Stella said in a rather ominous tone, explain, in full detail, how this spell works. Izuku and Megumin shared a glance for just a second, then they turned to look at the still annoyed mage before them. No. Megumin replied, loud and clear. The woman reeled back as if struck. Megumin has no reason whatsoever to comply with your demands. Izuku elaborated, linking hands with his petite companion, your demand is also unreasonable. You cannot ask for something without offering anything back, that's rude. The pride and honor of the Linden collage is at stake. Stella all but shouted, to her, there was nothing illogical about her request, an upstart like you. Allowed to walk with such honor. Ludicrous. Megumin and Izuku finally chuckled. Geez. It's just one spell. Megumin said in a mocking tone followed by her trademark smug grin, what are you going to do when I finish developing the rest of my spells? It was a bluff, of course, but Megumin wasn't going to let this opportunity go to waste. Having the chance to lord her spell all over the most prestigious of collages was something no living crimson demon could possibly ignore. You have more spells? Stella asked with a hollow voice. This situation was way too much for her. She was supposed to get the knowledge and then leave this upstart in the dust, as it was her right as a Linden mage. Instead, she had been absolutely disrespected. There is an anti-magic dummy still burning with the fires of hell somewhere in a dwarven smithy. Izuku decided to add his piece. Honestly, these Linden mages were hard to tolerate. What? The senior mage asked in surprise. She knew about such targets, but to hear that one was burning due to a spell? Megumin chuckled, unable to resist the impulse after seeing the shocked face of the high-ranking mage. What else could you expect? Megumin said with a fond smile, my boyfriend just taught me how to summon burning brimstone from the depths of hell. Izuku froze. He had expected their relationship to escalate, of course, but hearing such a statement from her lips, with such a proud voice. Stella froze. If what she heard was true, then there was no way to prevent the Crimson Demons from gaining fame and recognition. It had been a century since the last breakthrough in magic knowledge had been achieved, and the king was contemplating reducing the privileges of the Linden collage due to this lack of achievements. The mere idea that the king might shift his benevolence to the Crimson Demons was intolerable. So, it wasn't a fluke then? Stella asked with a trembling voice, this devastating spell wasn't an accident? Did you stumble upon some ancient tome of power? Nope. Megumin replied, holding her chin high with pride, it was the result of research and attaining true knowledge of the natural world. Izuku felt so proud of his companion, who managed to understand that nature held so much power, just waiting for the right mind to make use of it. He was still going to make sure that the petite arch-wizard learned more than just brutal detonations though. Stella took a deep breath, steeling her resolve for the action she would have to take now. I see. If that is the case. If you really are a prodigy. The mature mage drawled on as she stood up, her blue robes dangling down as she was slightly hunched, it'll be better if you die just as a fluke. Izuku and Megumin blinked in surprise. They were expecting the woman to beg for the knowledge, offer money for it, even going as far as requesting that Megumin join the famed academy. Izuku barely had time to react as a blade materialized in the mage's right hand. What happened next was too fast-paced for Izuku to think things through. The woman brandishing the blade against his dear Megumin. The petite arch-wizard recoiling in horror at seeing such a blatant attempt to murder her. Izuku jumped to hug Megumin in a thoughtless attempt to shield her from all harm. His body had moved, again, before he could think. But this time his heart had been consciously telling him what to do. His mind had no chance to cope with all the emotions he felt at that moment, when he felt the tip of the blade touching his back. His heart and soul had agreed on the course of action though, making his body react with the sole intention of keeping his beloved Crimson Demon safe. Bam! The door of the private room slammed open. A cute brunette was on the other side, worry written on her features. Her eyes were reminiscent of Megumin's, marking her as a Crimson Demon herself, just taller and more developed than the petite arch-wizard. Megumin! You are in danger! The girl shouted, the Linden mages are not to be. Her words died in her throat, worry being replaced by horror at what she found. A room full of blood and large spikes going everywhere, impaling everything except a single spot. I'm sorry. Izuku muttered as he fiercely held Megumin in his arms. Megumin couldn't reply. There was blood everywhere, and it was running down the massive spikes coming out of Izuku's body. Blood that was coming from a body skewered by a lot of said spikes. Now the blood was falling on her face, all thanks to gravity. To her, it looked like Izuku was the one bleeding, and the blood was still warm. Eyes rolling back, Megumin fainted, unable to cope with the idea of seeing her first death. Lady Stella. The apprentice cried in absolute distress. What the hell happened? Luna asked in horror. I'm sorry. Izuku repeated, tearing up, while slowly being covered by the blood of his first human victim. Up to this day, he had managed to cope with death. First by constantly repeating that culling wildlife was necessary, and that the animals hadn't really suffered, then by forcing his brain to accept that most goblinoids were far too feral to be considered humanoids that could be reasoned with, thus, their deaths were necessary to save human lives. Today all that crumbled down, as he found himself guilty of taking someone's life. No excuse could come to mind, not even the fact that he had defended someone important from a murderer. The fact remained unchanged and unchallenged. Izuku Midoriya had killed. In the small bag where he stored his belongings, Izuku's adventurer and slave cards pinged. The first denoting that he had unlocked the next step in the class system, and the other showing that his girls were now able to gain classes of their own. The following Omake was requested by Leafblade Fox. Thank you for your invaluable support. Omake, Aqua's adventure time. Aqua felt that her luck was truly changing for the better. After finally escaping from Izuku's tyrannical rule, she had joined with another reincarnate. One who properly worshipped her, that pampered her like she deserved, and ensured that she was as comfortable as possible. It was much better than living with the damnable nerd and his policy of hard work. The swords master was a bit of a creep though. Everything he said had a flair of romantic notion that was very one-sided. He may be cute, but she had no intention on being entangled with a mortal. The thief girl was alright. She wanted the boy, and money of course. She also seemed to notice that the goddess felt no attraction toward the swords master, which made her less of a problem. Leaving Axel hadn't been too troublesome. Aqua just made a quick stop by the graveyard to put up a powerful barrier, so her services wouldn't be required anymore, and then just went to their rooms to pick up all their belongings, as they weren't going to return anytime soon. The Pinkette, Aqua assured them, would be fine with Izuku as long as she kept working. The young druid was too kind to lost girls to let her starve or sleep in the stables. Their last step before hitting the road toward the home base of the Axis cult was to tackle a quest, one that they sneakily decided not to officially take. Rather, they looked at the details, and departed without registering it, more treasure to keep for themselves that way. See? The thief shouted as she pointed to a chest, one that just a second ago had turned into a giant maw and devoured a nearby stone. I knew it was too easy to be safe. Aqua shuddered, thinking about what would have happened if she had actually reached the chest. She really wanted the money, as leaving Izuku's party hadn't left her with any resources to her name, thus she wanted to lay claim to a treasure chest for herself. Here, this seems to be the last room. Kyuya stated as he readied Graham, the treasure he valued second to only his beloved goddess. Nodding to each other, they entered, ready to face the final boss of the dungeon, and claim the treasure for themselves. The final room was not the grandiose chamber that liches and necromancers all fancied. It was just a spacious bedroom. On the bed, a well-preserved skeleton rested, still dressed in a properly clean dress. To the side of the bed, in a well-crafted wooden chair, sat what appeared to be a mummified corpse clad in wizard robes. Keel the Lich, owner of this dungeon, had waited for someone who could cast high-leveled holy magic. Over the centuries he had been content on allowing random adventurers to come and plunder his home, keeping the most dangerous of his servants locked away, so the chances of meeting a priest of sufficient caliber increased. The blue-haired girl reeked of holy magic, and had shown no trouble when purifying the few of his servants that he sent their way. Greetings, adventurers. Keel greeted the party, showing himself as non-threatening as possible. The Lich didn't want to fight. He had no reason to do so. His beloved had passed away long ago, leaving this world without regrets due to his love being true. And now she waited at the gates of heaven, just needing him to be properly purified so they could take that last step together. He only had to make a request, and then offer all the treasure he had in his secret chamber in recompense. Then Kyuya had to act without thinking. "Die, monster!" Kyuya shouted as he unleashed the power of his relic blade. "You don't belong in this world." In a flash of light, the body of the lich, and the skeletal remains of his beloved, were turned to ashes. With a self-satisfied smile, the sword's master decided to ignore that liches reformed after enough time had passed, favoring the idea of simply getting out fast, with his party's hands full of gold. "I'll check the area for hidden doors and chests." The thief informed her companions as she went about her business. "I'll make a barrier here, so no other undead can take this room," Aqua declared, unknowingly paving the road for worse things to claim the dungeon. Kyuya, for his part, felt like a true hero. Just having Aqua by his side, he felt as if his power had been boosted beyond the capabilities of any other mortal. He even felt like he could face All Might on equal grounds. Their search for gold was cut short though. The sudden death of the final boss had triggered the remaining undead. Angry that their master was slain without getting his request even heard, and all of them seeking release by holy magic, they charged as a massive horde against the group. In an open area, Kyuya wouldn't have hesitated to unleash his sacred weapon, but in such a confined space? Even he knew the dangers of being buried alive. Thus, the group ran to the exit, screaming in horror like hopeless rookies. Justice. Izuku was panicking. Heroes mustn't kill, even in the direst of circumstances. Heroes always had to come through without crossing the line. When a villain ended up dead, it was always their fault, the result of their own villainy falling on themselves, or karma striking down the wicked. Sitting on a lonely chair in the deep darkness, the Linden mage looked both confused and scared. This shouldn't have happened. She was young, talented, and meant to gain a high status in life. Now she was here, at the gates of the afterlife. Izuku knew one thing, and that was how heroes always save people, whether they be in need or even villains. He had killed, the woman was dead, and even All Might would find the situation impossible. But he wasn't All Might, he was only Izuku Midoriya, a druid, so maybe there was something he could do? Quickly taking a hold of his adventurer's card, he noticed something, like a miracle being bestowed upon him by the world itself. He was ready to become an arch-druid, and that meant that all the restoration magic he had pined for would be his to command. The empty darkness was soon disrupted by the sound of steps, meaning that the moment of her judgment was at hand. What could she say in her defense? What excuses could she give? She knew that her lack of worship would not help her here. Izuku didn't have time to feel the change of class in his body. His heart was pounding in his ears, his soul aching to reverse his wrongdoing. Even when it was in self-defense, he was still guilty of murder. It didn't matter that Luna told him otherwise. Looking through his new spells available, the Verdinet noticed that Resurrection and Revive were not in his list. Instead, a different option was there. The Linden mage trembled before the disappointed stare of the goddess before her. Eris hadn't say a single word yet, but it was obvious that nothing good awaited her. Lack of faith, lack of morals, the lies. The goddess, usually the embodiment of benevolence, opened her mouth to speak. The frown on her face denoted how this was going to end. And then? A viridescent light filled the void. Gaga! Stella screamed as she opened her eyes. Seeing the wooden ceiling of the guild hall was not what she expected, unless hell consisted of repeating her final moments in an endless loop. "Miss Stella." Luna's voice, now cold and on edge, called to attention, making the mage flinch. "I hope you are ready to explain this mess you caused." The mage looked confused for a second, and then reality hit her like a cudgel to the skull. She had been revived, and now would have to find her way out of a rather ugly situation. At the least, she needed to ensure that the college's reputation remained untarnished. Stella struggled to start her explanation. She even felt that her voice was slightly different, and her body felt heavier. After effects of the resurrection magic, no doubt, it wasn't. "And don't try to lie," Luna added, sounding really angry. "We found some interesting documents among your belongings, and the bag of your apprentice." Seeing the stack of papers and sealed letters sitting by her side, the mage couldn't help but to look around in search of the culprits. In one corner, the druid was standing, shielding the upstart with a face full of determination. In the other, her apprentice was looking at her in utter shock. "I wasn't going to kill that little upstart." The mage tried her usual approach, not failing to notice the fierce look in the druid's eyes, or the disbelief on the guild attendant. "I was going to first intimidate her." That little murderer overreacted. The explanation was a stretch, but if the blonde had gone through the letters and orders, there was little else to do. Her orders had been as usual: get the knowledge by any means, or destroy the source. Assassination was not outright declared there, but it was a given. she only had to spin it in a way to make her not look like an overzealous idiot. Punishment would fall on her, no doubt, both from the guild and the academy, but at least she'd be able to continue her career. If that is the case. Luna drawled on, knowing that she had to prevent the loss of the best adventurer to ever grace her guild hall. Izuku, Megumin, you are free to go. You already undid any and all possible actions that may net you penalties, and I'm sure Megumin doesn't need to demand further retribution. Let's go, Megumin. Izuku was quick to take the offer. While he still felt guilty about taking a life, he couldn't say that he didn't feel relieved that he was now free of charges. Yes, let's, Megumin replied, sounding shaken still. Luna sighed as she watched the young couple walk out of the private room. Taking the first life was always difficult, an ordeal that typically required supervision. It was a true tragedy that this event took place in a place that was, in theory, guaranteed to be safe. As for you, Miss Important Mage. Luna returned her attention to the recently returned woman. Let's talk about all the crimes you committed today. Stella knew she was fucked. Back into the hall? While criminal charges had been avoided, and with no desire to pursue the matter with the college, Megumin and Izuku walked to their table with heavy hearts. The ideals of the hero world did not align with taking lives, even when there was no other choice. Such events were taken seriously, with investigations and therapy afterwards. Izuku couldn't help but feel like he had taken a step backwards, even when he had managed to undo the deed. For Megumin, it was a rather rude awakening. Talks about the future with her classmates always included the possibility of having to slay countless humans that were part of the enemy's evil forces, be it a local tyrant or the Devil King himself. It wasn't until now that the reality of such an action hit her like a sack full of bricks. There was nothing heroic in spilling the blood of your kin. Hey, Izuku. Megumin called to his attention, her voice carrying a plea for help. Can we avoid bandit hunting quests? Izuku was in a similar situation, wishing for someone to come, give him a hug, and tell him he wasn't some kind of monster. Of course, no bandit hunting for us. Izuku replied with a shaky smile, barely managing to keep his voice from wavering. Bandit hunting was a rather well-paid type of quest. It didn't come up often thanks to the city being suited for low-level adventurers, and the usual dangers of the wilderness keeping bandits from establishing successful camps. However, every now and then a group of bandits would find a nice cave to settle in and attack the roads. Bandits, being outlaws, would almost always fight to the death. The city's rather small prison was meant to hold citizens who had broken the law and awaited a trial, meaning that it wasn't necessary to waste space on outlaws who would be sent to the gallows anyway. That fact meant that adventurers were expected to kill them on the spot, and said adventurers, by right of conquest, were allowed to keep anything of value that the bandits had, with the exception of goods properly reported to the guild. Before this day, Izuku knew he wouldn't be able to partake in such savagery. After today. Megumin. A cute voice called at the top of her lungs. The brunette it belonged to was now jogging toward the petite crimson demon. Izuku stepped between the two on reflex. Eh? The brunette stopped, quickly recognizing the defensive stance. Chika and Liza immediately took positions to Izuku's sides, much to the increasing shock of the girl. Megumin sighed, but not out of exasperation. She found the gesture heartwarming, if unnecessary. It's all right, Megumin said as she tugged on the sleeve of the boy she loved. I know her. She is a crimson demon too. Sorry, I just... Izuku didn't even know what to say, his feelings still messing up his instincts. Sorry. The demigirl seemed to relax with the change, if only a little bit. They felt really guilty about Izuku needing to defend himself while they weren't that far away. It's okay. The brunette replied, showing a rather adorable smile. I know you are only protecting Megumin. There was a shyness to her voice that seemed to waver between fear and curiosity, but Izuku, for the moment, couldn't focus on that aspect. He did notice the way she exchanged looks with Megumin though. I guess introductions are in order. Megumin sighed again, this time in obvious annoyance. Izuku, this is Yunyun. She is part of the Crimson Demon clan, just like me. Pleased to meet you. Izuku replied, managing to still keep some of his confidence thanks to all the time he had spent surrounded by pretty girls. His demeanor seemed to surprise the now identified Yunyun. You? Yunyun's voice seemed hesitant, and almost hopeful. Aren't going to laugh at my name? Why would I? Izuku's response earned a chuckle from the petite arch-wizard. Yunyun, this is Izuku. Megumin continued before she decided to mark her territory. He is my boyfriend. Megumin's cheeks turned scarlet red as she blurted the last part. She had noticed that Yunyun had scanned the boy, and no doubt correctly labeled him as strong, if only because she had seen the gruesome scene. Knowing that Yunyun had a lot more developed body, there was no other option but to declare ownership of her crush. Chika. Chika presented herself in her whispery voice. Oddly enough, Yunyun didn't wince. She pointed to the still tense gator girl, Liza. Boyfriend? Yunyun was obviously surprised. She then proceeded to switch between staring at each one of them, as in, you two, together? Megumin, for a moment, recovered her attitude and energy. Her grin was proof enough of such a claim. Actually, as a matter of fact, Megumin held the full attention of the newcomer, this man and I. The moment Megumin placed her hand on Izuku's back, all her cheerfulness disappeared. Her hand was now wet, sticky. One look at where she had touched and her stare became distraught. Maybe we need to hit the baths first, Izuku said, knowing very well why Megumin had gone into shock again. We really need to get cleansed. Izuku was still covered in blood, human blood. Before or after we deal with that mage you revived? Darkness asked. Her lack of reaction at the sight of blood, or the knowledge of Izuku's first kill, meant that she had gone through such an ordeal before. What happened to my beautiful body? The excessively loud screech reverberated through the entire building. Izuku knew what had happened. Reincarnation was a spell that worked differently from resurrection. Instead of calling the soul back to the body, it forced the soul to complete the cycle of rebirth, and used the remains of the body to create a new body befitting the new cycle. That meant that while the spell offered true purification, it also had the high chance of changing the race of the receptacle, and he certainly didn't want to deal with such consequences right now. Catching the panicked face of her friend, Darkness decided to offer her help. You go to the baths. Darkness offered with a smile. I'll deal with the mage. Izuku, right now, was grateful beyond belief for having the honor of having the friendship of such a noble woman. Of course, he didn't know at the time that said girl wanted to test her noble might after knowing that her friends had been endangered, much less that she would request his aid in some indulgences. In the background, Ila wisely decided to not partake in any party antics. She had no idea how to deal with nobles, and certainly preferred to do some errands for the guild in the meantime. She could always catch up with her party leader after the dust had settled, right? Later, at the public baths. The sound of warm water being poured over heads echoed as a group of young women painstakingly washed their bodies, finally finishing their rituals of cleansing. Megumin was finally free of the blood on her body and the smell reminding her that she was responsible for Izuku's first kill. The sensation was still there though. So, Union's voice snapped Megumin out of her inner turmoil, the girl having been worried about her since there hasn't been any of the bickering they usually started. What's their deal? Union's question was aided by a pointing finger. Chika and Liza were actually swimming in the water, largely thanks to the fact that not many bathers were there at that hour, and the owner of the baths was not a big fan of throwing out demi-humans, especially since the two of them belonged to the hero of Axel. Megumin barely managed to stop herself from blurting out unnecessary information since she really didn't want to hurt Izuku again. Belong to Izuku. They really enjoy belonging to him. Yunyun blinked in confusion, as Megumin's wording seemed odd, even by Crimson Demon standards, but she chalked it up to her fellow Crimson Demon still being shaken. And you are happy with him? Yunyun asked now, showing that she cared for the petite girl, and them? Megumin froze at the question. So far, she had enjoyed her time with Izuku, and had chosen to not mind about the demigirls. It was the first time she had stopped and considered if she was happy. The dream of every girl of her clan was to find the perfect guy. One who would partake in their culture, who was a valorous hero, skilled, strong, handsome, rich and fully intended on their happiness. As a rule of thumb, most women of her clan only managed one of those objectives, 2 if they were lucky, and 3 if they used curses to get the man. Taking a second to count how many tags Izuku fulfilled. Yes. Megumin finally replied, at least I think so. Yunyun decided that there had been enough questioning about that topic. Finding deeper answers would require a different approach. Now came the important part. So, Yunyun changed to a cheerful tone, how did you manage to create that powerful spell? The only answer she got was a snort. Megumin. Yunyun shouted, I'm your friend. Friends share secrets. Who said we were friends? Megumin replied, looking away with a rather savage grin, that's my spell, and I don't have to share nothing about it. Megumin. Yunyun's shout earned a rather unexpected reaction. Like a flash, Liza was already hugging Megumin, her strong and scaly arms making a remarkable fortification. Her glare, though, was far more intimidating. Megumin is very important to Master. Chika explained while standing behind a now startled Yunyun. Chika doesn't want Master to be upset if anything bad were to happen to Megumin. The raspy whispers of the black harpy may not have had any effect on the brunette, but the sparks coming from the stone floor she kept slightly scratching did. Please don't hurt me. Yunyun was not exactly well versed in close-quarters combat, much less while being naked against talons that may as well take the place of curved swords. After taking the bath, Izuku and company had finally decided to visit Wiz. They needed to check on the progress of Izuku's robe and distract themselves from their recent ordeal. All they had to do was pick up Darkness on their way to the magic shop. "Come on," Yunyun bemoaned yet again, "you need to tell me how you did it." Izuku also had to find a way to stop this circus. He understood, he really did. Megumin's achievement was a big deal, and he could attest to her bright mind, as fusing science and magic was no easy feat, but why did people have to be so insistent? "Why should I share my secrets with you?" Megumin was acting all childish again, a tendency that Izuku found to be a good thing. "These are my secrets." As the bickering continued, Chika moved to walk by his side. The avian girl leaned ever so lightly on his side, trying to share her warmth. "Chika knows Master is a good person." Chika muttered, even lower than normal, "Master is no murderer. Master is a savior." "Thanks, Chika," Izuku replied, almost coming to tears. By the gates of the guild hall, one smiling Darkness was awaiting for them. "Izuku." "Megumin." Darkness loudly greeted, her smile coloring her voice as she did so. "You should have told me she was punished before I could deal with her." Megumin snorted at the remark, and Izuku flinched. "Seriously?" Darkness continued as she walked to properly join them, turning her into a dwarf of all things. Loud laughter echoed through the party, although Izuku still felt a little guilty about that. It hadn't been his intention, not by any stretch of the imagination, but that had been the result. Reincarnation had deemed that the next life of the Linden Mage was going to be that of a dwarf. Honestly, as far as Izuku was concerned, the woman didn't end up looking ugly. She may not have been the beauty she was as a human, but her dwarven body was still very feminine, and her features not too round, and as far as he was aware, dwarves could still be mages, right? It wasn't intentional. Izuku added in defeat, knowing that nothing would ever change the fact that he had changed the life of someone in probably unwanted ways. Darkness recounting how the apprentice kept muttering about the love of his life being gone now didn't make it any easier either. As the group walked through the streets, Izuku began to feel something odd. The more he thought about the whole ordeal, the more he began to feel at peace. He had acted to defend someone dear to him while the attacker had the intention to kill. In the natural order of the world, those who were ready to kill should be ready to die as well. Yet, his heart still felt troubled. Heroes shouldn't kill. Seriously. Union's voice snapped Izuku out of his musings. "My father banned the use of your big bang inside the village." Megumin's laughter was better than medicine, soothing his aching heart. Such joy was worth protecting. It wasn't long before they reached Wiz's magic shop, but they couldn't even reach the door before an unexpected sound hit them all. "I'm done dealing with you." Crash. The sound of breaking glass was something that quickly put everyone on guard. The scream of the shop owner only accelerated their feeling of dread. "Wiz!" Izuku shouted as he entered the shop full speed, closely followed by everyone else. There had been no need for a signal. Everyone reacted just like Izuku would. He just had to make sure that their friend was all right and protect her from any invader or attacker, her status as a great mage notwithstanding. What they found was a shopkeeper looking angrily at a broken mirror. It took her a couple of seconds to notice the group. "Izuku?" Wiz asked, looking surprised by the intrusion, but at least she was fine. Izuku knew she wasn't happy. There was no attempt to glomp on poor Chika, or asking if Liza had shed more of her hard scales. "Are you all right?" Izuku asked, and by now the rest of the group was either looking around, or at the shattered mirror. "We heard you scream." "Scream?" Wiz asked, trying to sound innocent. Izuku's worried stare informed her that such attempts were pointless. "Oh, right. This mirror? I couldn't make it work properly. But magic mirrors are crazy expensive." Megumin supplied, providing new information to the young archdruid. "Even if one malfunctions, they can be sold for a lot." "It made an ugly reflection of me," Wiz quickly explained. "That makes sense." Yunyun and Darkness replied at the same time. Izuku and Megumin exchanged worried glances, but decided to keep quiet. The ditzy shopkeeper seemed to not want to elaborate. "You must have come for your robe." Wiz suddenly changed gears, going back to her ditzy smile and bubbly attitude. "It's ready. I think you'll love it." Izuku decided that if his undead friend wanted to keep things private, it wasn't his place to keep digging. She would tell him when she felt the time was right. A few minutes later. "Looking good, Izuku. That looks fit for a noble. I'll like to order one myself." Izuku blushed at the praise. He had just spun around while wearing his new robe. The midsection, running vertically from head to waist, both front and back, had been replaced by Liza's white scales, giving it a tabard-like look. Cords of golden thread adorned his shoulders, and the hood, at his request, had been emblazoned with a yin-yang symbol. It looked better than he hoped. Thank you, Wiz. Izuku directed the attention to the smiling shopkeeper, for doing such a superb job. You are making me blush. Wiz replied while swooning a little bit, but if you want me to make you a new druidic focus, I'll happily take some of those beautiful black feathers. Now she was back into her usual antics, and Chika finally jumped behind Izuku as was her usual reaction. I appreciate the offer, but I don't really use one, so... Izuku began to apologize, but then everyone looked at him in shock. You don't use one? Yun asked. That's impossible. Wiz added, druidic magic requires a focus due to the need to commune with nature and channeling mana. To not use one risks overtaxing your body. Izuku, could it be that? Darkness started, first looking worried, and then shifted to a more excited demeanor, that you've been handicapping yourself in order to struggle against the pain? Izuku's eye twitched before he looked at Megumin. Don't look at me like that. Megumin shied away, information on druids is scarce at best. I thought you were using something really small as a focus. Izuku facepalmed. It was his fault, really, he should have asked around for other druids to gather better information on his accidental class choice, not just assume that Megumin knew everything. The fact that so far he had not found much trouble with his skills didn't help either, that certainly explained why his gene-sick world tree was so taxing. So, Izuku began, gaining a glowing red blush due to how stupid he knew he was about to sound, can I ask for your help with this? Wiz gave a warm smile and a nod, landing a hungry stare on the black harpy. A little bit later, after giving some of Chika's feathers to Wiz, the party decided to look around the shop while they waited for the new druidic focus to be ready. They also tried to console the black harpy, who looked rather sad to have her feathers being manipulated by someone other than her master. It's okay, Chika said while shedding tears, if it is for master, Chika is okay with it. The avian girl was obviously not okay, but she endured for Izuku. Liza, of course, couldn't understand. Giving up her scales had been no big deal, although she really enjoyed seeing them covering her master. Hey! Yun suddenly called for their attention, why is this called a friendship crystal? The brunette was pointing at a crystal ball. It didn't show any special markings, nor exuded energy of any type. Oh? Wiz looked up for a moment, and then she returned her attention to the staff she was carving runes into. That crystal ball is used to measure the compatibility between people, allowing them to become friends if they are compatible enough. You can try it if you want, it is safe, probably. Probably? Izuku asked in concern, he really didn't like how this world disregarded personal safety most of the time. Megumin. Yun instantly called, taking a pose while pointing at the petite crimson demon, I challenge you to check our compatibility. If we are friends, we have to share everything. Megumin looked reticent for just 1 second before she countered with her own pose. Ha! 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 Megumin's enhanced laughter was rather adorable, we are nothing alike. We aren't compatible in the slightest. I accept your challenge. To Izuku, this sounded like just an elaborate way to play rivals, like very good friends that like to compare benchmarks as they grew up. He also guessed that Megumin really needed to keep her mind busy, to seal away any thoughts about witnessing yesterday's debacle. It didn't take long for the two girls to set up the ball and hold onto it. At Wiz's request, they poured a small amount of mana into it before it activated. Both girls were quickly surrounded by a wall of bluish light, like a cylinder, and in an instant, it happened. Screens flicked to life, and began to show images. Happy birthday, to me. A child like Yun sang alone while sitting at a big table, a cake before her, but absolutely no one else around. Her voice had a haunted tone to it. Food. Foodud. The childlike Megumin of the image thought loudly while stealing breadcrumbs from a large kitchen. Both girls shrieked, unable to believe that such horrible moments of their past were being showcased to the world, to the rest of the party. As more images began to form, Wiz approached, already holding a wooden staff with engraved runes and adorned by jet black feathers. Ah, right, I forgot to mention how the artifact works. Wiz stated with a smile, it shows all the embarrassing truths of the people touching it so that nothing is hidden, and they can truthfully say if they are compatible or not. This was not what the pair of crimson demons wanted, not by any stretch of their imagination. Izuku could tell that his dear Megumin was quite close to doing something drastic. It's alright, even a demon will do as a friend. Seeing the cute brunette draw a pentagram was very disturbing, especially because her eyes were a mix of hopeful and demented. That's so amazing, big sis. A mini Megumin shrieked in joy as Megumin gave her a thumbs up. On a campfire, a bunch of bugs were being roasted, much to the infinite shame of the now famous arch-wizard. Both girls looked as if their sanity had been lost, but before they could do something to stop the artifact, all the screens died. Then, a different screen came into being. Most of the background was blurred, but the main scenery was clear. It was some sort of playground, with little kids playing in the sand. One of them looked like a super tiny version of Izuku, with cherubic features that would melt the heart of any woman. Another one, a spiky blonde, looked like a typical mischievous kid. And here, it says, Deku, which means useless. The moment the blonde said those words, the rest began to laugh, while little Izuku seemed hurt by those words. Back then I didn't know any better. Izuku explained a little bit of the scene, not looking at those around him. I was born without any special power or skill, while all my peers had been gifted with something that made them different. Izuku had decided that the girls shouldn't have to face this alone, and by exposing himself, he could spare them the trauma of their secrets being aired to the world. The scene shifted, and the now slightly growing kids were marching over a small bridge. The blonde brat fell into the shallow river, and while he was quick to shout that he was all right, little Izuku was quick to rush to his aid. "Are you all right? Does anything hurt?" The earnest voice of the little kid may have been heartwarming, but the already heroic concern was enough to put to shame anyone trying to become a hero. That may have been completely unnecessary, but that's what felt right to me. Izuku added, and then the image showed how the blonde not only slapped the offered hand away, he also pushed Izuku in a rather hateful way. A new image came up. This time, it seemed like something from not too long ago. Izuku was standing on the top of what appeared to be a building with metal railings. The boy was trying to talk to a massive man who looked strong enough to walk through a brick wall and not notice it. It took a moment, but the mountain of muscle suddenly deflated, and took the form of a skeletal man seemingly frail enough to die if the wind blew his way. A muddled conversation followed, and then, the man gave Izuku the most hurtful words to ever be heard by a boy with a lofty dream. "Before you asked if you could become a hero without a kozai quirk, the answer is no, you can't." The girls could clearly see the moment Izuku's heart broke. They could even hear his very soul scream in agony. Hearing that from the man I idolized hurt. Izuku confessed, "It was more painful than my worst nightmare. Like being welcomed to the deepest part of hell." At that moment, the sphere became dormant, and the light faded away. The effect was over, and the girls were no longer exposing their embarrassing memories. Everyone has a past that they try to hide from others. Izuku began his lecture, trying to make the Crimson Demon girls feel better. "It's just part of growing up, and why are you all crying?" Instead of an answer, all the girls present jumped at him to give him a group hug. He couldn't understand them between all the crying and the sobbing, but it seemed like they were trying to console him, telling him that he was already a hero, that everyone from his past was wrong. Izuku has never felt more welcomed, but he guessed this was a part of growing up too. "Omake, is this a date?" Yunyun had decided to tail Megumin on her date. The petite arch-wizard might have said great things about her boyfriend, but Yunyun was skeptical. The boy seemed to be too good and too caring for his own good, which rang some alarms in her head. She had read enough novels to know that this type of guy only wanted to get under the skirt of the heroine, and then show their true colors. Of course, she knew that it could be possible that the boy was the real deal, and just didn't know Megumin enough to know he needed to be careful. It totally had nothing to do with jealousy and envy at the idea of her underdeveloped fellow Crimson Demon getting a good man before her. A picnic? Yunyun muttered to herself as she watched the demi-human set up a large blanket and a large basket, so far away from the town? Could it be? In that moment, the brunette's mind began to conjure mental images of all the smut parts of her favorite romantic novels. The escapades to secret clearings deep into the woods. Sneaking into old mansions. Visiting dark caves previously prepared to hold beds and preserved food. Traveling through secret passages and into dungeons within various castles. All ending in the same energetic activities? Explosion. Megumin's shout was immediately followed by a rather big detonation. The shockwave almost lifted Yunyun from the ground. A quick look revealed that the petite arch-wizard had fired her spell into the lake, and the resulting rain was forming a small rainbow. That was normal by Megumin's standards. What wasn't normal, the thing that stung at Yunyun's heart, was seeing the druid walking back to the blanket while carrying Megumin not only like she was some sort of princess, but showing a level of care that was borderline erotic. The princess carry was a most prized event for any girl from the Crimson Demon clan, as it symbolized a deep desire to form a permanent bond of love with the partner. The fact that it was mostly seen between married couples only exacerbated the feeling. Then? No way. Yunyun nearly screamed at what she saw next, the lap pillow, and hand-feeding too. Izuku had positioned Megumin's head on his lap, giving her a most comfortable position to enjoy the rest of the outing. Seeing the petite girl entrust her limp body to the boy with such ease was bad enough, but then seeing said boy pick up a sandwich, and then place it into the girl's mouth? Now Yunyun was boiling with envy and jealousy. It wasn't that she wanted to steal the boy, perfect as he seemed to be. It was just that she believed it would be her to be the first to find proper romance. Why are you spying on Master? The raspy whisper of the black harpy froze Yunyun's blood. Now she noticed that the bird girl was no longer around Izuku. Chika thinks that spies are bad. Chika knows how to deal with bad too. Seeing the sharp talons wiggle her way made the brunette scream for help. A little bit later. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Yunyun kept repeating her mantra over and over again. It looked sincere enough, but Megumin still seemed annoyed. I was just worried about Megumin. Yunyun explained, and yet again, it made sense to Izuku. I didn't want to ruin your date. Yunyun's final shout made both Izuku and Megumin turn red. Date? Both screamed, gaining an even deeper shade of red to their cheeks. Dummy. Liza reprimanded the brunette, as even she understood that now the date had been interrupted. The first rescue mission. Ila thought that her new party leader couldn't bring more chaos to the table than he already did. She was absolutely sure that there had to be a limit to the absurdity of the druid's illogical might. Kyuya was handsome, strong and wealthy, and he had his hands full with 2 ladies. It was natural for the young warrior to be so successful, and yet, this man. Let me join your party. Yunyun, a recently arrived crimson demon, begged to the party leader. A party leader, wanting to be surrounded by members of the opposite sex? Yeah, Ila had seen that before. In fact, it was a rather common sight. Powerful adventurers often fell into the temptation of creating a harem, but few managed to do so and properly manage it. That had been why Kyuya stopped at 2, and most likely why he abandoned her. Personally, I don't have a problem, but... Izuku replied, making it obvious that he was happy to have more people on his team, but a quick look at the petite arch-wizard revealed that at least someone wasn't happy about this development. Megumin, do you have any objections? Ila watched the petite girl's glaring eyes. She knew how she was feeling at the moment. Just after having declared the party leader as hers, a competitor had arrived. The new girl was pretty, had a more developed body, and a personality that seemed easier to handle. The little girl was right to fear the newcomer. Her answer was obvious. Only personal ones. Megumin's honest response surprised everyone, most of them expecting something far more dramatic. I'm afraid she is only after my secrets, or worse, after my boyfriend. Ila blinked in confusion, as she didn't expect such a level-headed response. She certainly didn't act this mature when Kyuya took in the thief. Megumin. Yunyun called in distress, obviously trying to come up with some sort of excuse or explanation so that she could still join this party of humanoid monsters. It is true I still seek your forbidden knowledge. But I'm not a homewrecker. At this point, Ila decided to tune out the conversation. It was too painful to watch romance bloom in this party, when hers had failed so miserably with the swordsmaster. Izuku, however, had no such luxury. Can you please not shout about that here, in the guild hall? Izuku was mortified, to say the least. He was not ashamed of his relationship with the petite arch-wizard. He was overly self-conscious of the image he was gaining. It had never been his intention, but he had ended up surrounded by extremely beautiful girls. He really didn't need people to talk about his interactions with them, especially since half of the rumors about him sleeping with them all were somewhat true. Even if they stopped at sleeping in the same room, alright, cuddling too. Izuku is right. Darkness joined the argument, siding with the arch-druid. He is not treating us like we are his harem, no matter how much we may want it. He only wants Megumin. Izuku had mixed feelings about that declaration. For my part, I have no problem with you joining our party. Darkness continued, pausing to take a sip of her beverage. Even if you are just as useless as we were, I'm sure that Izuku will teach you how to be useful. Megumin and Ila winced in unison. Megumin couldn't help but remember the days when her obsession with explosion magic made her undesirable to everyone, and how Izuku turned her into probably the most famous arch-wizard of this generation. Ila was still trying to get over the fact that, in only 3 days, her skills had gone from mediocre to acceptable. It was like she was becoming a better adventurer just by being in close proximity to the arch-druid, or by being away from Kyuya. I see. Izuku took a thinking pose, and then turned to his slaves. Chika, Liza. Your opinion? Now it was Yunyun's turn to synchronize with the pinkette. Seeing the green-haired boy ask slaves their opinion was, well, shocking. They knew that slaves could have their own mind, but it was their duty to agree to their master's wishes no matter what, making their opinion unneeded. Chika doesn't mind a new friend. The whispers of the black harpy still made everyone, sans Yunyun, feel uncomfortable. As long as she doesn't try to hurt Master or Megumin, Chika is fine with her staying. Watching Chika protectively surround the petite arch-wizard with her wings was heartwarming, especially for Izuku. Turning to look at the albino gator girl, Izuku only got a grunt and a shrug. Liza had no proper opinion. If Izuku said it was okay for the newcomer to stay, or not, it wasn't her place to question him. Her only concern was to never again be late to protect her dear master, to be quicker to rip the head of any aggressor that threatened the man she loved. I see, Izuku repeated as he squeezed Megumin's hand under the table. Ila, your turn. Ila was thrown for a loop. While she was technically part of the party, it was a temporary thing, and she was indebted to this boy by a ludicrous amount of money. In her position, had this been any other party, or party leader, her opinion would only not be asked, but she would have been forbidden from having one at all. Ha! Ila decided that staying quiet wouldn't help her. Why are you asking me? Because you are part of the party. Izuku replied with an honest smile. It took a lot of effort for the ranger to control her fluttering heart. Not because she was falling for this boy, but because for the first time, she felt welcomed and wanted in a group. She also had to fight against the ugly thought of returning to Kuya, especially after carefully thinking on everything she experienced at his side. Ila struggled for a moment, trying to think on what was best, on what kind of potential the archdruid wanted from those surrounding him. The pink-haired ranger took a moment to look at the assembled party. The crusader who'd faced Beldia, a general of the Devil King's army, and fought on equal grounds. The gator girl that had slaughtered a nightmare bare-handed. The petite arch-wizard who actually vaporized said general. Even the black harpy was a danger with her harmful voice and sharp talons. Maybe, Ila almost said something stupid, but quickly stopped herself from suggesting a competition on sheer power. We should take a quest to test compatibility? Teamwork. For a moment, Ila held the stares of the entire party. For a moment, she felt like she was going to be either dismissed or reprimanded. Then, Izuku smiled at her. That is actually a great idea. Izuku's answer seemed to shock the ranger. Darkness, would you kindly take Ila and Yunyun to the quest board? Sure. Darkness replied with a smile. She really loved to be relied upon. Let's go. I'm sure we can find something to serve as a proper test. As the three girls moved to the board, Izuku and Megumin locked eyes with one another. You aren't going to reject her, are you? Megumin asked with narrowed eyes. Only if you tell me right now if there is a good reason to do so. Izuku replied, keeping an expectant look on his face. Megumin sighed, and then proceeded to scratch her head. She was, due to her underdeveloped body, reticent to allow Yunyun and her unreasonable big breasts near her boyfriend. However, Izuku had proven to be reliable and faithful. He had yet to even pay that kind of attention to the likes of Darkness, who actually had made advances on him, or the recently joined Ila, who had all the marks of a girl that would catch the attention of the archdruid. Being honest with herself, Megumin found that the only dangers to her position were Chika and Liza, but they were girls she was okay with. Just remember that I'm your girlfriend. Megumin finally conceded. Izuku gave her a head pat and fondly smiled at her. Her pout was too cute to ignore. Fair enough. Izuku replied, assuring his girlfriend that she had nothing to worry about. Now help me with this. I'm not making the same mistakes again. With that, Izuku finally revealed why he sent the other girls to fetch a quest. From his bag, he took out Chika and Liza's slave cards. Immediately, Megumin noticed why she was needed. Slaves did not get classes. That was for adventurers only. However, and due to the cards for both being made with the same spells, Chika and Liza's had unlocked the ability to select classes. No doubt the result of their meddling with the slave seals, and Izuku becoming a class that could easily dictate how nature worked. Owning slaves with adventuring classes was heretical twice over. First, because adventurers couldn't be slaves, and second, because slaves shouldn't have a class other than their lowly station in life. So, there were a lot of possible questions about this situation, and Megumin didn't know where to start to tackle the mountain of problems that could derive from this. What is your question? What I need to know is, Izuku drawled while laying the cards down for Megumin to clearly see what these classes do. My class selection was kind of an accident, and while I was able to adjust to it, I'd rather know all the bases for Chika and Liza's. Megumin had to take a moment to process the situation and the request. Of course her boyfriend wouldn't give a single fuck about repercussions and consequences. Of course he wouldn't mind earning the ire of the two major religions. Why would he? Considering his status as an outworlder that saw such institutions as barbaric and idiotic, why should he? His class of archdruid had no need to acknowledge the laws not set by nature herself. Alright, here is what these do. Megumin started, but stopped to look at the demigirls. You better pay attention too. I have the feeling that Izuku is going to let the choice up to you. 10 minutes later? They hadn't had too many options, but the ones they possessed were troublesome to consider, at least for those not part of Izuku's group. Chika had all the options available that were reliant on dexterity or intelligence, and even hybrid ones, that left her with rogue classes, mage classes, and hybrids of them. Liza, however, showed to have not only obscene amounts of strength and constitution, but also unusually high wisdom. This mixture gave her the options of the various barbarian, fighter, and even ranger classes. Izuku had to fight the urge to snort at the idea of Liza having more common sense than most adventurers. So, Izuku started, looking intently at his demigirls. Which classes do you want to get? Megumin rolled her eyes. Of course the lovable idiot would give them the freedom to choose. Both girls tilted their heads in apparent confusion. Neither could understand the question, because while they were technically free to choose their own path in life, they wanted nothing more than to be by their master's side. Chika hesitated for a moment, but quickly gathered the courage to speak. What class would help master more? Izuku facepalmed at that. He really wanted Chika and Liza to be free, independent, and happy. However, he had to remember that after being slaves their whole lives, such a goal would require a lot of re-education and adaptation. It was foolish to expect them to be completely independent in such a short amount of time. Megumin sniggering at his side wasn't helping his case either. Well, Izuku hesitated for a moment. Telling them what he needed was the easy way, but it hurt his feelings. Chika and Liza were people, real people, not characters in a game where he could just choose for them what was best for him. Even if he did choose for their own benefit, it made him feel horrible. Our party could use someone with lots of skills. Izuku started, noticing the hopeful eyes on the black harpy, but other than that, you could choose something able to do anything you want to do. Chika tilted her head for a moment, then smiled such a pure and bright smile that it was heartwarming to watch. Chika wants to use many skills for master. Chika answered, then she leaned forward to lower her voice even more. Is there a skill class that can use magic too? Chika would like to use magic for master too. Megumin froze. On one hand, allowing a harpy to learn magic would mean being branded heretics by the Church of Eris. On the other, it would be so cool that she almost failed to not push Izuku to search for such a class. Actually, there is. Izuku answered, happy to see that Chika had desires of her own. Here, the trickster combines the heavy skill use of the rogues with some spells from the wizard class. Chika gave couple of cute jumps in place, happy to see that her master really intended on fulfilling her wishes. Then, if master allows it. Chika whispered with a big and cute smile, Chika wants to be a trickster. Izuku was more than happy to select that class for the avian girl, feeling great after finding some sort of desire to fulfill for her. Then he turned to look at Liza. Liza. Izuku spoke softly. The albino gator girl was attentive, but it was hard to read her face. Is there anything you want to achieve? Contrary to what the book said, or the warnings many had given him, Liza had been surprisingly easy to deal with. The reptilian girl just wanted food and cuddles. But Izuku knew that she was a person too, and not an animal. She had to have her own desires and goals, things that she felt a need for, something stronger. Liza replied after just a few seconds, me, stronger? Master. Safe. Izuku blinked a few times. You want? Izuku did his best to transform those words into something that made sense to him, to be stronger, so you can protect me? Liza nodded. The lizard folk have the natural instinct to protect what they love, or the things they feel attached to. Megumin began to explain, smiling in a clearly teasing way, Gatorkin are even simpler, she feels she belongs to you, which makes you something irreplaceable. I don't think she needs to be that much stronger though. Izuku gave an awkward smile to the petite arch-wizard. Many had called on Liza's stupidly high power after seeing her tail and claws wreck brick walls, but Izuku knew that such things were nothing compared to her main weapon. Just like alligators, a gatorkin's jaws were their strongest weapon. If Liza were to truly become stronger, to the extent that even reinforced ironwood wouldn't stand a chance. But who was he to deny the wishes of his beloved girls? Well, Izuku started as he read some of the classes available to Liza. Totem warriors can become much stronger when they rage. Totem warriors, an advanced form of barbarians, allowed the adventurer to gain traits of the chosen animal totem. These traits only took effect while activating their rage. In Izuku's mind, this meant that Liza would get a lot out of this class, as her race had a trait called Cold Rage, which made their violent impulses hard to read. He guessed that if they faced opponents that could read faces, they wouldn't know when Liza was in rage mode. Me. Stronger. Liza's semblance turned bright, her waving tail betraying her happiness at the idea, me. Dragon. Izuku chuckled, finding the happiness of the reptilian girl adorable. Sure. Izuku replied, much to Megumin's growing distress, if that's what you want to be, I'm sure you'll be able to reach that goal. Megumin felt the sudden urge to warn the archdruid. Having a slave that strong was going to raise some alarm bells on the royal guards and the guild, but then again, the mere possibility of Liza getting that strong and be her bodyguard by proxy, it was too cool to pass on. Me totem. Me dragon. Liza was very happy at the prospect of being even more capable of protecting her dear master. With a sweep of a finger, Izuku selected the class. There was no need to select the totem. Apparently, Liza's will and desires were enough for the magical card to understand what animal she had selected in her heart. In the card, the ominous word, dragon, appeared. Chika's changes upon selecting her class were subtle. Her feathers became less shiny, though not any less beautiful, and she could tell that her limbs felt nimbler, more dexterous. For Liza, however, the changes were more obvious. Her scales became bigger, tougher, harder and heavier. Her reptilian hands and feet, already clawed, gained a much more menacing look with the increase in muscular mass and the length of the claws. Even her human-like skin looked thicker. "At least you look happy," Izuku nervously muttered, noticing how Liza waved her tail, and how Chika was jumpy. "Good luck controlling them." Megumin muttered too, knowing very well that she wasn't about to abandon her boyfriend. "Do you think they are going to take more time to get a quest?" Izuku, grateful for a chance to distract his mind from obsessing about Liza's changes, turned to take a look at the still arguing girls at the quest board. Then, the doors of the guild hall opened violently. Bam! Entering the hall, panting and sweating, a young woman was looking everywhere. The teary eyes of the brunette were distraught, and it seemed like she was about to have a mental breakdown. "Lean?" The muscled adventurer with a mohawk asked to the now identified brunette, "What happened? Where are Dust, Keith and Taylor?" Rumors started to be heard, some even throwing terms like TPK. Izuku didn't really know this party, but he was horrified to think that a group of young adventurers were now gone. Finally, the brunette turned to look at him, and just like that, she darted his way. "Aizuzu kuku!" Lean cried in utter despair, falling to her knees in front of the archdruid. "You have to help them. Please save them." What? Izuku wasn't ready to have people kneel before him for anything. What happened? Izuku pushed his shock down once he realized what was being asked of him. Someone needed help. There was no time to feel awkwardness. Darkness, Ila, and Yunyun dropped their search for a quest when they noticed that the young wizard was begging for Izuku's help. Close behind them, Luna also approached to understand what was happening. "My party. The guys." Lean started, still freaking out. Izuku placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, trying to reassure her, to calm her down so she could explain what was happening. Adventurers, even entire parties, dying out in the field or inside dungeons was not only a reality of this world, it was a common occurrence. The guild offered only the unlocking of the power and the chance to gain skills, but there was no guarantee of survival, no clause about being of enough value to warrant a search party if you went missing. In this world, you signed up for adventure on your own, so it was you who accepted all the risks involved. We took the yearly quest of exploring Keel's dungeon. We only intended to search the first floor for the respawning chests. It was just meant to be a quick cash grab, no more than taking down a zombie or two. Lean began to explain, quickly starting to tear up. Keel's dungeon was a weird structure of times past. Supposedly the final place of rest for a long-gone necromancer, one that didn't turn into a lich due to his beloved dying before the rituals could be completed. At least, that's how the old stories described it. There were 10 known levels to the dungeon, and every year, the chests would refill themselves. It wasn't a life-changing amount of gold, but it was good for low-level adventurers, and oftentimes, used as a sort of tutorial for adventurers about to leave the city to start a journey on their own. It had, of course, its dangers. The dungeon had some low-level undead monsters, and no shortage of large insects and other vermin. Given that Lean's party wasn't exactly the weakest in town, they shouldn't have hit anything too dangerous. We found that the chests on the first level were empty already, so we decided to take a peek at the first rooms of the second. Lean continued, her voice trembling now. In the back, Luna immediately suspected foul play. The dungeon was free to enter for everyone, that was a given, but any adventurer that went without taking the quest was expected to at least report that they did so. The fee that the guild took for entering the dungeon was diverted to maintain the seals at the entrance of the catacomb. If adventurers start entering to plunder the respawning chests, and they didn't divert a fraction of that money, the priests would stop renewing the seals, which would risk the undead getting outside, into the woods, and eventually threaten the city. "We met?" Keel. Lean finally revealed, making the entire hall go silent at such a revelation. He was angry. At us? At everyone. He was rambling about his beloved being sealed away. Luna and the other attendants quickly began to take note. This development needed to be reported immediately, as such news was terrible. If Keel was real, then he must be a lich, a really powerful undead that was now lurking too close to the city of beginners. We were captured. He said we were going to be used to break the seal. Dust then convinced him that there was someone in town, someone so powerful that the seal would be undone in seconds. Lin began to cry, and Izuku could already guess what had happened. My party chose me to come for you, Izuku. Please, save them. Before, Izuku interrupted her by standing up. His eyes were like steel and his face like stone. The archdruid had no obligation whatsoever on this affair. Nothing was forcing him to step in and save this party. Izuku owed them nothing, he didn't even know them beyond the fact that they were adventurers too. They owed him nothing, meaning that he had nothing to lose by letting them face their fate. They didn't even have any riches or resources he needed or desired, meaning that he wouldn't get anything in return. Say no more. Izuku firmly stated, making every adventurer return their eyes to their plates and their ears to their own businesses. Lin knew that there was not much else to do. Izuku, the hero of Axel, had no obligation toward a team of adventurers that, at best, were barely acquaintances. Indeed, asking the archdruid to enter the dungeon and risk his life for absolutely nothing was perhaps the most foolish thing to do. Perhaps her party members knew this beforehand, meaning that they only wanted her to survive. She couldn't give up though. She and Dust still had to settle their situation. Taylor still had to declare his feelings for Luna. Keith had that archery competition in 1 month. She had to convince the archdruid to save her party. She steeled herself, preparing her heart and mind to offer her body as payment, to offer her. Slam! Izuku slammed his staff on the floor. The impact, causing a sound almost supernatural, interrupted all noise and even the thoughts of everyone in the guild hall. Megumin, Liza, Chika, darkness. We are going to save this party. Izuku declared, loud and firm, Ila, Yunyun, you are welcome to come, but you two are under no obligation to follow us. With that, Izuku took the hand of the still kneeling Lin. She didn't need a command or further prompt to know it was her turn to guide the hero of Axel to where he was needed. Izuku! Wait! Luna attempted to intercept, knowing that placing Izuku in danger was a no-go if she wanted to ensure the prosperity of her hall. That is not a sanctioned quest. There will be no. I don't care. Izuku interrupted, not slowing down, I'm not going to stand still when there are people in danger. And with that, the archdruid left the building as his entire party followed him without hesitation. In fact, many would attest, every one of the girls was sporting a look of determination that would put most heroes to shame. A couple of hours later, reaching the entrance to Keel's dungeon had been educational for Izuku. The damnable thing hadn't been too far from the city. If the undead inside were to pass through the seals of the gate, they would reach the city within hours, blindside the scarce guards, and cause a lot of casualties before a proper defense could be organized. The priests of the two major religions were supposedly keeping the seals strong, but they were tackling this as a business. Izuku had to take a moment to rein in his anger, unable to believe that these religious imbeciles would focus on the money rather than the safety of the civilians. 2 sentries. Ila reported, gripping the light crossbow in her hands for dear life. She was not ready for this, but if she didn't step up to the challenge, when would she ever be? Undead, by the looks of it. Ila knew that the information was unnecessary. The humanoid figures standing guard at the entrance of the dungeon looked like rotten corpses. Still, Izuku had asked for her input, because she had the skill Farsight, which allowed her to look at distant targets much more easily. These are not brainless zombies. Megumin supplied, doing her best to look at the distant targets. They are holding their weapons like trained soldiers, and not like boneless animated corpses. Izuku nodded at the new information. He quickly understood that these undead sentries were probably smart enough to know they needed to bring him to their leader. He now needed to know if they could be reasoned with. Whites. Yunyun added, surprising the group, look at the bright eyes. They have sentience. The magic girl is right. Chika added, perched on a tree branch and looking forward without needing to squint her eyes, Chika can see that the deities can think. Ila didn't know what was worse, facing the fact that her skills seemed redundant yet again, or that the raspy whispers of the black harpy seemed to be even more harmful now. That's what I needed to know. Izuku muttered, and then turned to look at his rather large party, Darkness, Ila, Chika, Lin, stay here and remain on guard. If we don't come back soon, get back to town to get a proper rescue team. The rest, come with me. Grave nods followed the archdruid's orders. Darkness and Chika didn't like the plan at all, but they understood that this was necessary. Izuku, Megumin, Yunyun and Liza stepped out of the bushes and into the clearing that marked the entrance of the dungeon. The undead sentries pointed their swords at the intruders, but otherwise didn't move. My name is Izuku Midoriya. Izuku firmly stated, internally freaking out at the idea of addressing a pair of intelligent undead. Other than Wiz, I was asked to come here so a trio of adventurers may be released. The sentries exchanged glances for a brief moment, then nodded to each other. "We weren't expecting you so soon." One of the whites spoke, his accent was off, but still understandable. "Follow us. The master awaits." Several minutes later? Izuku was not expecting this to be the lair of Keel the necromancer, or rather, the lich. It was dark and dusty as it was supposed to be, but the decorations were very human, and not centered on death and dark rituals. The final hallway was also quite the anticlimactic scene. Instead of leading to a grand hall or throne room, it led to a rather cozy bedroom. Just outside said bedroom, Izuku could make out the form of a mummified corpse wearing mage robes. And inside the room, he could see the three adventurers, struggling to clean the floor? "Do it carefully." The lich screamed to the struggling trio, "I don't care if it takes you 1,000 years. I want that barrier gone and the ashes of my beloved undisturbed." The three adventurers inside the room winced, but otherwise didn't complain. "Keel? The lich?" Izuku asked as he gave some shy steps toward the powerful and ancient undead. Keel turned his head, looking at the new arrivals. He really wanted to keep shouting, to bring his wrath down on everything and everyone. But the boy before him had clear eyes that belonged to an angel. It melted his anger away. Seeing the other two girls shyly hide behind his back didn't help with the heartwarming feelings. The reptilian girl was another case entirely. "Yes," Keel replied, trying to read the group before him, "I apologize for being so rude, but some scoundrels thought that destroying my beloved's remains and separating me from her was something fun to do. 3 spellcasters and 1 brute. This was an odd group. At least the boy resonated with strong magic. Am I to assume you are this powerful young man capable of undoing any seal?" Keel's question made Izuku grimace. "It depends on the seal." Izuku replied with as much confidence as possible, and yet, not agreeing to anything. He had no idea how powerful this lich was, and endangering Megumin and Liza was something he really wanted to avoid. "Of course. It would be inconsiderate on my part to believe you are almighty." Keel replied in a rather reasonable way, much to Izuku's relief. "This seems to be a holy barrier of an extremely high-level variety. If it weren't etched in such a shoddy way, I would believe it was done by divine hands." As Izuku followed the pointing hand of the lich, it became obvious to him that the symbols on the floor were drawn with cheap chalk. It was like some useless idiot tried to vandalize the place. Why would anyone do something like this instead of purifying the place? Someone with such holy powers should have been able to see that sending all the undead to the afterlife was better than just sealing the area in the long run. "That is chalk." Izuku pointed the obvious. "Have you tried water?" "That is impossible." Keel quickly answered, not faulting the adventurer for resorting to common sense. "That dust covering the place is actually the ashes of my beloved. The imbecile that attacked us destroyed her body, and I will not allow her ashes to be washed away. I would have cast a spell to rebuild her body, but I can't enter thanks to this horrible barrier." Izuku felt pity for the lich. It was easy to imagine that this guy, undead as he was, only wanted to spend the rest of his unlife with his loved one. "Guys," Izuku called now to the trio, "have you tried gathering the dispersed ashes first?" It was something stupid to ask. It should have been the first thing these adventurers should have tried. "There is no way." "Are you crazy?" Dust was the first to shout back. "There is no way we are going to use a broom in here." Keith seconded, "We'd be breathing the ashes if we used one." Izuku threw the guys a deadpan look. It took a lot of willpower not to call them idiots. However, before he could facepalm, an idea struck his mind. Megumin. Izuku's call was immediately answered by his girlfriend, who was already by his side. "Do you have Gust of Wind in your skill list?" Megumin not only nodded, she quickly took out her adventurer card, and immediately went to slide her little finger along its surface. "No way." Yunyun called, unable to believe what she was seeing. "Megumin, you cannot spend points on basic magic. You call it basic." Megumin retorted, smiling like a true devil as she finished learning the basic spell, "But my boyfriend will turn it into something crazy." Izuku gave a cute chuckle. He was already holding a piece of cloth, which was quickly folded into the shape of a pouch. "I'm not sure if it is super crazy," Izuku stated, earning the attention of the lich and the other adventurers, "but this will solve our problem today." Giving the bag to Megumin, Izuku shifted into a pose that his girlfriend recognized as his "I'm going to explain something complex" stance. Gust of Wind allows the caster to manipulate the direction of the flow of air. This is something that can be used to push clouds, fog, or lightweight things. Izuku started, earning nods of understanding from everyone present. "Megumin, I want you to place the focal point of the spell at the bottom of that pouch, make the air flow from inside and through the bottom, while pointing the opening of the pouch to the floor." Yunyun watched how Megumin, the most stubborn of the demon clan members of their generation, obeyed without protest. It was surreal to see the petite girl who had never spent a single point on anything other than explosion doing as she was told. It was already impossible to believe that the petite arch-wizard wasted points in something so useless. Fush! Yunyun and Keel watched in stunned silence as the effects of the spell took effect. The cloth pouch inflated, and air was being sucked inside, along with the ashes that were on the floor, the bed, and the walls. It was as if they were being commanded to gather in a single place, lured to the inside of the impromptu pouch. In only a couple of minutes, there were no more ashes to collect. That is a vacuum effect. Izuku explained to the still shocked spellcasters of the group, by forcing the air out of the pouch, we force air from outside to go in, since the opening of the bag offers less resistance than the cloth that makes the pouch, the air goes through it, and since the opening is so small, the pressure differential makes the suction force stronger. This makes it easy to drag in small particles, like dust and ashes, which do not pass through the cloth at the bottom of the pouch. Yunyun was speechless. With a useless spell and a useless item, Megumin and her boyfriend had created a most useful technique. This innovation could reduce time when gathering resources, cleaning areas, or even hiding messes. Keel was dumbstruck. Despite his wealth of knowledge and high intelligence, he would admit to never have thought on combining spells and items to create effects as useful as this. Here are the ashes. Megumin reported while handing the pouch to the lich. It wasn't crazy, but it was effective. The smug grin on Megumin's face was setting the nerves of the cute brunette on fire. She wanted to create crazy things too. Thank you, Keel said while clutching the pouch with ashes close to his chest. You don't know how happy this makes me. Can we go now? Dust asked, rudely interrupting the touching moment. Keel turned to look at the trio of adventurers, his undead face easily passing as a deathly glare. Despite that, Izuku could see his kindness surfacing. 1,000 gold if you mop that barrier away. Keel suddenly replied, sounding far more amicable now, each. Yes sir. The three idiots replied, and quickly went to get buckets with water and mops to clean the chalk from the floor. As for you, my good man, Keel said now, turning to look at Izuku, is there a way to repay your kindness? Izuku just smiled. He already had his reward in knowing that everyone would return home today. A successful rescue, with a touch of kindness. On the other hand, something still bothered him. I need no material reward. Izuku replied, earning startled reactions from Yunyun and Keel himself, but I'm curious. Why do you remain here as an undead? Your beloved feels purified, her soul is not shackled to this plane. He was no priest, but he could feel the foul energies that tied Keel and his soldiers to this place, energies that were absent from the ashes in the pouch. Keel sighed, but instead of refusing, he decided to explain everything to the kind archdruid. It took an entire hour, but in that time, the lich had recounted his tale. The ancient kingdom, his escape with his beloved. The creation of the dungeon, how she passed away while he became an undead, that she was still waiting at the gates of heaven, waiting for him to be purified so they can cross the gates together. And that's why I'm still here. Keel finished, feeling liberated after retelling his story, warmth filling his being at seeing the teary eyes of the two wizards accompanying the druid. That's why I'll remain here, until a kind priest comes and finally purifies me. I see. Izuku said with a sad sigh, I wish I could purify you. I really want you to be reunited with your beloved. Keel smiled as much as he could, knowing that this boy was being honest. It is what it is. Keel replied, you've already helped me enough. Asking for more, asking for the impossible, is simply rude. Keel, Izuku called, earning the attention of the lich, I cannot purify you like a priest would. But, would you like to be reincarnated? It took a few seconds for the words to sink in, but when they did. Omake, Aqua's road trip. The path to Alconrentia was getting more difficult by the day. It wasn't that money was running low, or that there were constant battles along the way. It was that Aqua was getting less room to breathe. I don't need you in my bed. Aqua's scream had gotten a lot of attention, more than what the blonde swordsmaster wanted. Lady Aqua. Kyuya did his best to remain as silent as it was possible, I didn't mean it like that. Aqua was pretty sure that she wasn't mistaken. When the guy had proposed the three of them shared a single room for the night, the ex-goddess senses blared with all her internal alarms. His creepy attitude intensifying by the day wasn't helping. Really? The thief asked with a deadpan stare, I thought you were finally going to include her tonight. See? Aqua kept screaming in outrage, making people in the inn look at the trio in disgust, the harlot betrays your intentions. Hey! The thief was outraged now, and thus, began to shout too, how can you call me that when you wear that excuse of a skirt? You are basically begging to be foo. Calm down. Kyuya did his best to interrupt the starting fight, there is no need to judge anyone's clothes. My skirt is actually a skirt. Aqua was not going to back down. Why would she? Goddesses did not back down. This clothing gets me in the good graces of our valiant party leader. The thief declared with pride, if I dress like this, it is for him. Unlike you, who claims to not want him, and yet shows everything to everyone. Seriously, please. Kyuya could feel the stink eyes of those around him. He was being judged like a pervert. Hey, you three. A group of ugly-looking thugs approached their table. Kyuya was immediately gripping his sword, although he knew he couldn't strike first. How much for a night of fun? The question was accompanied by a large pouch full of gold coins being placed on the table. We are in dire need of relief. Another of the thugs added, smiling at the girls in a horrifying way, don't worry, just normal stuff, nothing weird or harmful. I may get a little weird, but I'm paying extra. A third one joined, then the three began to let out perverted giggles. We are not prostitutes. Aqua and the thief screamed in horror. You aren't? The leader of the thugs asked in honest surprise, but the way you are dressed, we thought. Leave. Kyuya hissed, truly angry at how the situation turned. Before I do something we all will regret. Geez, calm down pretty boy. One of the thugs replied, we only made a mistake. Damn. I wanted the guy to suck me dry. The last thug said as the group left to find their fun elsewhere. This is your fault. The girls shouted at each other, making Kyuya drop his head in defeat. This wasn't going as he thought it would go. A humble lesson. Yunyun watched the situation unfold before her, trying really hard to understand what was happening, and why it was happening in the first place. Liza, take these guys to the surface. Izuku commanded, earning a grunt and a firm nod from the albino gator girl. They are free now, and Lean must be worried sick for them. As the daughter of the village's chief, Yunyun knew that going overboard was the trademark of the Crimson Demon tribe. Either by exaggerating mannerisms, or using the flashiest and strongest spells available, they had to leave a strong impression wherever they went. But what Megumin's boyfriend intended to do? Megumin, Yunyun. Izuku called, sounding serious and cool, like a true heroic leader, I need you two to draw a sacrificial magic circle. Make sure it will not take anything living or souls. Yes. Both Crimson Demons replied, scrambling to do as commanded. Reincarnation was a weird spell, unique to archdruids, and officially considered as undesirable for the common adventurer. The spell used twice the amount of mana compared to the more acceptable resurrection, randomly selecting a new race and sometimes gender for the target. The mana cost also increased according to the time the target had been dead, making the idea of resurrecting an ancient lich ludicrous. Bring all the hoard from our treasure chamber. To the last coin. Keel commanded to his minions, earning cheers from the 6 whites at his command, and the horde of zombies and skeletons following suit. Today we'll be free. Izuku had countered Yunyun's worries by mentioning an option that most spellcasters had at their disposal. The sacrificial magic circle allowed the sacrifice of material resources in order to power up spells. However, no sane spellcaster used it because the monetary cost was considered wasteful. This necessity was theorized by some academies as the cost in money seemed to be related to the perceived value of the spell. Megumin. Yunyun called in a hushed tone as she kept working on the magic circle, there is no way this would work. As an accomplished archwizard who had spent most of her time studying magic and its principles, she knew that the mana conversion ratio was unbearable. The best outcome recorded demonstrated that the coin used was twice the cost of the mana potions that would have been used to perform the spell. Of course this shouldn't work. Megumin replied with a smile, not stopping for a moment, just like his Genesic World Tree, or my Big Bang. Yunyun nearly recoiled at what she perceived as mockery, or sarcasm. She had no idea of what this Genesic World Tree was, but Megumin's Big Bang was a super destructive spell that no one could claim to know how it worked. Even the idea of knowing the intricacies behind the blocks of reality seemed too otherworldly to not be part of some forbidden knowledge that actually existed. But we are talking about Izuku, my boyfriend. Megumin continued, throwing a smug grin towards her fellow archwizard. At the very least, this will work as intended. Although this will most likely surpass expectations. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, 3 guys finally reunited with their last party member. Lean had been worried out of her mind, her imagination getting the best of her by conjuring images of the 3 idiots she called friends being cursed, drained of all blood, and or being stripped of their flesh. Seeing them alive and well was better than a healing potion. You idiots! Lean screamed as her conflicted emotions failed to settle between her aching heart and her overactive imagination. I was worried beyond reason. As the boys descended into a flurry of apologies, and even sharing with her their well-earned reward, a certain pink-haired ranger couldn't help but sigh at the scene. Even this unremarkable girl was having far more success than her. I don't get it. Ila muttered to herself, still practicing her aim with her light crossbow. What did I do wrong? Or was it my clothes? Taking a moment to look at her clothes, she nearly chuckled. She'd forgotten that she had changed her outfit just a day ago. Izuku had called her miniskirt impractical, and instead suggested a new outfit. Ila's fear of being nearly stripped was shut down when he had provided the clothes. Khaki shorts, green tunic, leather boots and bracers. For the ranger, it was probably the tamest outfit she could wear. It was almost the opposite of what Kyuya had chosen for her. And it felt comfortable, while giving her a sense of safety, as nothing private was in any danger of being shown to the world. To make things even more depressing, after dressing in a more sensible way, she was finally being taken more seriously in the guild. Chika wants to be by master's side. The whispery voice of the black harpy returned the attention of the ranger to the present, with a pronounced shiver running down her spine. Horrible voice aside, Ila could now understand why the archdruid kept the harpy. She was loyal to a fault, obedient too. Not to mention useful, as she was capable of distracting opponents in combat, and able to deliver messages and small packages if needed. She was pretty to look at, after you managed to pass over the talons and feathers. The gator girl was on a different level though. For a brute slave, she was surprisingly tame, to the point of making her doubt all the rumors and warnings about Liza's race. She was of course dumber than her lizard folk cousins, but her unbelievable strength and obsessive devotion made up for all that. She had, after all, successfully escorted the adventurers back to their party member, and managed to clearly deliver Izuku's message. That reminded her of the impossibility of the situation. Her new party leader was dealing with Keel the Lich. How does someone deal with a lich? Ila muttered to herself again. It wasn't a fight. Liza had been clear on her report. Peacefully dealing with a lich? Had it been any other party leader, it would made her laugh. Kyuya would have destroyed the abomination in an instant, although, a lich willing to parley was something new to her. Would Kyuya attack someone willing to talk? Bad DUM. All thoughts were interrupted by the tremor that traveled beneath her feet. Or maybe, it was something gentler, like a heartbeat. Looking around, Ila finally noticed that the other party had already left, and darkness seemed a little bit restless. The demi-human seemed perfectly calm though. Bad DUM. The second tremor was slightly stronger, and was accompanied by a sudden surge of mana. It was a very large concentration of it. Back inside the dungeon, Yunyun knew that the archdruid wasn't normal from the get-go, but this was pushing even the normalcy of the Crimson Demon clan. Megumin was grinning like a madwoman, clearly enjoying the sight before them. A mountain of gold coins, jewels and even magic items was piled inside the sacrificial magic circle. The objective was to return a lich to life, which in turn would end the foul necromancy that bound his servants to this world. It was a mountain of gold, probably enough to buy her entire village, and the services of all her clan. Just looking at it hurt her, and she was meant to stay still and watch it disappear? Tap tap. Izuku tapped his staff against the stone floor. The sound reverberated through the narrow hallways, echoing far into the depths of the underground structure. Oh, Wheel of Death and Rebirth. Hear my voice, listen to my plea. Izuku intoned. His staff, made of iron bark, topped with 3 beautiful jet-black long feathers, was waved gently in smooth circles above his head. The mana in the room was activated, and everyone, living or undead, could feel the resonance. Life must end for life to begin again, but these souls still have roles to play in this time. Yunyun immediately caught that something was wrong. The spell was meant for a single target, and yet, Izuku had talked in plural. Megumin's smug grin only startled the other Crimson Demon more. Let them pass through the cleansing cycle of death, let them retain themselves on rebirth. The sacrificial circle activated, and the gold coins were quickly turning into pure mana, fueling the altered spell. Yunyun noticed that Izuku never turned to look at the vanishing piles of gold. In fact, he didn't show any level of concern for the amount of riches being destroyed. Let go of your old life, sins and shackles. Start anew. Reincarnation. Emerald light bathed the room and filled the hallways with ease, blinding everyone for a minute. When Megumin and Yunyun recovered their sight, they were witnesses to one of the most unbelievable images they had laid eyes upon. Keel and his whites were gone. What happened? A gruff voice sounded. It belonged to a male dwarf. Are we really alive? A female dwarf spoke now. It seems so. A female halfling took her turn to speak. But why? A male halfling countered. Why am I now a woman? A human woman shouted in distress. Lucky you. A human man added in sarcasm, taking a troubled look at his body, seemingly wishing to be of a different gender. The 6 whites had been reincarnated. But that wasn't the most impressive feat. Keel, a gorgeous female elf, with golden hair signaling her heritage of a high elf, spoke. Is that you? Her sweet voice, coupled by being cradled by who could only be Keel himself, made the situation look like a scene taken from a love novel. Speaking of Keel, my beloved? A rather handsome male dark elf asked back, his brown skin sharply contrasted with his silver hair. My dear Sasha? My love. Sasha yelled as she embraced Keel, I couldn't stand watching you suffer here while I was at the gates of heaven. Seeing those scoundrels attack you brought me to madness. Keel couldn't answer, or say more. Having his beloved in his arms, even if she was in a different body, even if her voice was not the same, it was too much. The once powerful Lich was crying his heart out. Not only was he free of the curse of undeath, he had been given a chance to enjoy life with the one he loved the most. Yunyun couldn't fully process the events happening before her very eyes. An archdruid would obviously reincarnate someone recently dead. Only the leaders of the circles could claim to be able to reincarnate someone who has been dead for a year. Her party leader reincarnated 7 ancient undead people, and a woman who had been dead for just as long, with a single casting. What was he then? Izuku! Megumin's sudden scream earned everyone's attention. Izuku had collapsed, and the petite arch-wizard was doing her best to help him. Take him to the bed. Keel immediately commanded, and be careful, that young man is more worthy than a hero. The 6 now reincarnated lieutenants obeyed without hesitation, even when they were no longer under any sort of compulsion to obey. About 2 hours later, I'm fine. Izuku bemoaned, still laying in the old bed. Really? I only need something to eat. All his good berries had dried up, rendering them unusable. Running out of mana was far more debilitating than the archdruid thought possible. He really wondered how Megumin got used to such a horrible feeling. Food! Food! Chika barely managed to keep her voice to a whisper, making all the newly reincarnated people flinch. Good thing we had some food packaged. A satchel with random things, mostly dried food, was soon passed to Liza, who almost tore it apart so her dear master could get the food as soon as possible. Master, eat! Liza said as she, as gently as she could, placed a piece of dried meat into Izuku's mouth. Master, better. Megumin, Keel and his beloved couldn't help but chuckle at the scene of clumsy love. It took a few minutes for everyone to notice that the reincarnated high elf was naked, and a couple more for a proper dress to be found and given to her. Yunyun was still trying to hopelessly comprehend what had happened. It shouldn't be possible. Yunyun muttered in a corner, occasionally stealing glances at Izuku. Not only did he modify the spell, he actually managed to use the sacrificial circle without breaking concentration. As she watched the archdruid continue to freely interact with the demi-humans, and the recently reincarnated, Yunyun began to allow her heritage to take over her thoughts. Among all the crazy delusions, above all the over-the-top ideologies among her people, one train of thought remained as their anchor to sanity. What if someone proved to be even more outlandish than them? So, Megumin's voice broke through Yunyun's rampaging thoughts, how are we going to explain all of this to the guild? There weren't enough theatrics in the entire Crimson Demon clan to answer that question. Guild Hall, well into the afternoon. Luna was at the verge of a nervous breakdown. Not only was she running out of time to come up with a plan to convince Izuku and his party to not leave town, but now she was dealing with the aftermath of an unsanctioned rescue operation. Even if it had been successful. Seriously. Dust was, again, shouting out his allies' praises. Izuku swooped in like a hero of legend. Usually, Luna would expect laughter at the remark, but the situation had been so serious that most adventurers and guild staff were still reeling. You can say it twice. Keith seconded while their other companion was already unconscious after drinking himself into oblivion, and just like that he solved everything without any kind of struggle. Lean had been ordering food to their table nonstop. The poor girl had been the most distressed about the whole ordeal, and the guys were treating her to anything and everything she wished for the trouble. Luna, as a veteran, knew all too well what the girl had expected to go through to get the required help. And yet, Izuku had demanded nothing. Hey, Luna. One of the waitresses called to the busty guild attendant, if you really want him to never leave, why don't you marry him? Luna turned a deep shade of red, and promptly began to sputter. She found the archdruid cute, true, but he was younger, and a druid. She, as a city girl, had no way to endure the kind of life the boy would surely lead. And the petite crimson demon had a way of glaring at other women, not to mention the slaves. The doors suddenly opening got everyone's attention. To be honest, it had been happening since Lean's party returned, with everyone expecting Izuku and company entering safe and sound. This time, it actually happened. Can you please stop it? Izuku asked as he entered the building, followed closely by quite a large entourage. I'm not a god, demigod, or saint. I'm not even a hero yet. But what you did is nothing short of a divine miracle. Darkness shouted as she kept up with Izuku's pace, her eyes lit with sparkles. Not even an archpriest could do something remotely close to that. Since meeting him at the exit of the dungeon, and learning of what had happened, Darkness just couldn't stop her enthusiasm. Now Izuku was everything she wanted to follow. A man with a heart and soul so pure that he was the spitting image of an angel, a will so strong it bent the laws of magic, and a disposition so heavenly she was astonished he didn't have wings. She was willing to stop wishing he started abusing her if that meant having her saint to protect. Being a god, or even a demigod. Yunyun muttered, as she had been doing the entire trek to the guild hall, much to Izuku's increasing embarrassment. Yes. That would explain his ludicrous power. Please. Izuku begged once more, just reaching his usual table, plopping down in hopes of finding some sort of respite. Stop. You have to admit that their point is hard to argue thanks to your tendency to overdo things. Megumin said with a smug grin on her face, sitting purposefully close to her boyfriend. Yunyun had been showing increasing signs of interest in Izuku, to the point of Megumin catching her muttering something about taking him to the clan's village. She was still a noble among the clan, so it stood to reason that she would like to entice him into becoming the next clan leader, with everything implied by that. Megumin really didn't like that idea one bit. Be thankful you were allowed to walk from the city gates onward. Megumin finished, making Izuku shudder at the embarrassing memory. Liza had carried him like a princess since the moment it was decided they were going to walk to the city, and didn't allow him to stand on his own feet until he ordered so with a firm voice, a few meters before the actual gates. It actually pained Izuku to know that the gator girl had been really sad after he gave the order. Although most didn't notice due to how her face didn't change at all, just her tail drooping a little bit being the only sign of her mood. Angel or just a man with a heart of gold, it doesn't change that we owe you for all eternity. Keel interjected, but didn't sit down with the group. My dear friend, what you kept from the small remnant of my treasure is just too little as a way of thanks. If you ever need help of any kind, do not hesitate to come to me. Most of Keel's immense treasure was gone, leaving him with little more than 200 million eris in gold, and some magic items and jewelry to his group's names. From this, Izuku only took the beak of a cockatrice as his payment, and only because Keel himself insisted on him taking something, even if only as a token of friendship. Thanks, but for now you should get used to your new life. Izuku replied with a warm smile, especially while taking a glance at Keel's linked hand with his beloved. You have a lot to live for now. Yes, of course. Keel replied with a smile that most would never see in a dark elf. We'll see you later, friend. Now we need to register to get our identification cards. With that, Keel and his group went to the counter, so they could properly start their new lives. At the counter, Luna had been visibly relieved to see Izuku in good health. The arrival of unknown people wasn't that big of a deal, even when they seemed friendly with the archdruid. It was easy to imagine Izuku being kind to them, thus earning their friendship. We would like to register. Keel politely requested, putting the best and gentlest smile he could muster. After that, I would like to apprise and sell some magic items before browsing through homes available for sale. Of course. Luna replied, slightly taken aback by the smile of the dark elf. Everything seemed normal at first. Hundreds of years old? Elves lived much longer. Already a necromancer? Necromancy may be illegal inside of towns and at hallowed ground, but the class was not. Besides, dark elf. The massive numbers on his stats could have brought attention, but since he was Izuku's friend, it seemed to fit. Then she looked at the name. You are Keel the Lich? Luna's scream forced every adventurer to turn their heads to the counter. Izuku knew there could be issues, but hearing Luna scream, in terror no less, was too much. As he and Megumin made their way to the counter to lend some aid, Yunyun and Ila watched as a couple of priests hurriedly walked out of the building, with Darkness darting after them immediately. Former Lich, actually. Keel attempted to pacify the startled woman, finding little success. I was waiting for a high-level priest to purify me, but instead I found a wonderful friend who was able to reincarnate me and my friends. You mean Izuku? Luna asked, although the mere idea of successfully using reincarnation on an undead was so outlandish it couldn't be anyone else. Does this mean your dungeon is safe? One of Luna's worries was that, if Keel was a lich, and real, it would mean that the dungeon would have to be quarantined until the main branch of the guild properly ranked its difficulty, meaning one less way to earn money and complete quests. With the lich removed, and somehow convinced into becoming an adventurer himself, there would be no need of a quarantine, meaning that business would remain as usual, meaning that Izuku managed to provide a greater service to the city of beginners. The idea of seducing him was definitely becoming more appealing. But of course, although it no longer is mine. Keel replied while hugging the beautiful high elf by his side. Curiously enough, she seemed to bask on the contact, instead of being bothered by it, the place got cleaned, so you can rest assured there are no more undead there, or any need to delve into those ruins." Luna blinked in confusion. She had a bad feeling about that answer. "Well," Luna nervously continued as she handed the adventurer's card to Keel, "at least the respawning chests are still there." Keel's dungeon, with the respawning chests, was one of the selling points of the city as a place for beginners. She had to make sure whatever Keel had enchanted them with remained there. "What respawning chests?" Keel asked in honest confusion. Izuku had reached the counter by now, just in time to see Luna going ghostly pale. "The respawning chests of your dungeon." Luna was trying to remain calm, with no success at all. "Every year the chests would renew their treasure. It's the best feature of that dungeon. There is no way you can be Keel and not know about that." Keel looked even more confused, although he quickly recovered, as he finally pieced together what the woman was talking about. "Ah, right. The chests." Keel's words brought a sigh of relief to the busty attendant, just for his next words to deliver a fatal blow. "I had my minions fill them every now and then. I had to keep luring adventurers if I wanted to find a priest powerful enough to purify me." Izuku facepalmed. Magic, as an everyday feature of this world, made for an excellent explanation for any mysterious phenomena. People found that chests inside a dungeon replenished after some time? They immediately chalked it up to magic, never thinking that someone could manually do so instead. It was stupid, along with the alarming lack of common sense. "So," Luna's voice took a haunted tone, "the chests. They won't be refilled. There is no need for me to lure any more adventurers there." Keel revealed, earning gasps from many adventurers that love to make a quick cash grab on the first floor of the dungeon. "So, I decided to take what little remains from my treasure to enjoy this new life with my wife and friends. Hence why I asked for a home to purchase." Luna wanted to scream. One of the main appeals of the city was gone. Granted, there was still plenty to do around the city, and there was no shortage of quests. But the main reason for many to stay, one of the once steady sources of income, was gone. The priests were going to. There they are. A sudden shout interrupted the conversation and registration process. "There is the foul necromancer. Arrest him." Everyone turned at the gates to see a group of priests, now accompanied by a group of guards. "Is it true, mister?" One of the guards, an old man that looked like a retired adventurer, asked as he took a firm step forward. "Are you really a necromancer?" "Yes, I am." Keel replied before the silence could become tense. "I'm pretty certain being one is not a crime though." The priests looked insulted by the remark. Izuku could tell that they were part of the Eris faith, as their iconography was quite obvious. "It isn't, sir." The guard quickly shot back, maintaining his authority, while conveying that he was just doing his job. "But you must understand that such a dangerous class makes other people nervous, hence why I must request that you show me your adventurer card, so I can make sure there are no crimes to your name." Keel happily complied, knowing very well that there was no way for him to have committed a crime. Izuku had made sure to purify his soul during his reincarnation, meaning that any past sin had been forgiven. However, most religious adventurers were rather quick to voice their opinion. Being a necromancer should be a crime by default. Even Aqua's followers wouldn't mingle with such unclean things. Ugh! The stench of undeath is so awful. Izuku really wanted to call out the stupidity of these people. Keel was never an evil person, as his motivation to rebel against the monarch of his era was born out of love. Even his minions were turned into undead by their own volition. He had to rein in his anger though. Just as being a necromancer was not a crime, voicing discomfort was also their right. "Well, everything seems to be in order, mister." The guard took a long moment to read the name a couple of times. "Keel." There was a moment of tense silence. "Just like the name of the dungeon," the guard stated as he returned the card. He decided he wasn't being paid enough to prod any deeper. How coincidental. As the guard left the hall, still followed by a couple of priests demanding Keel to be put to the axe, Luna kept sinking in despair. Reporting this was going to be a nightmare? "Isn't this a good thing?" Izuku asked aloud, knowing well in his heart he didn't do anything wrong, that he just helped people in need, now that there is no more danger of undead escaping the dungeon and no need to pay the services of the church. This means that those resources can be directed elsewhere. Luna perked up at that. While the treasure chests were no longer a thing, the need to pay the church for maintaining the seals was gone too. The adventurer lure would have to be replaced though. Maybe hunting snow sprites could become a thing, if Izuku could be convinced to join the hunt to deal with the Winter Shogun. "How can that be a good thing, you idiot?" One of the priests started to yell, surprising Izuku with how upset they sounded. "How dare you take away from us our source of income?" Izuku had forgotten that both churches were seeing this problem as a business. Milking money from the city for a job that should have been their sacred duty, not a protection racket. The guild should punish you for this travesty. Izuku had to nearly bite his tongue. He really wanted to yell back, to ask if he was supposed to let others suffer so this corruption could continue unchecked. Then he remembered that a hero's job was to save people, not to make a conflict bigger. He'd saved the adventurers, who were currently cowering down on their table, obviously wishing this attention didn't turn to them. He had stopped a powerful lich from making more undead minions, preventing a possible catastrophe on a city that was now making him look like a villain. He should be marked for this. A hero's reward came from knowing they did good, with fame and wealth being a mere second thought. We should lynch him. Izuku barely had time to react, grabbing Liza's hand to prevent her from murdering everyone in the hall. He really was thankful for her obedience, as he knew very well that he lacked the physical power to even slow her down. Chika still looked at him with an expression that was asking permission to sink her claws into the priest's. Izuku didn't do anything wrong. Luna finally shouted, silencing everyone in the hall. His actions may have been outside a normal quest, outside the sanction of the guild, but he didn't break any laws, or harmed anyone. He saved a group of fellow adventurers, and even redeemed a once believed to be a powerful lich. He harmed our pockets. A lone priestess shouted at the back of the hall. I'm sure you'll soon find another way to demand our money. Luna replied with venom in her voice. Her cold glare was well received by the young archdruid and his party. Even Ela found herself surprised at this action, for even Kuya had to bend to the whims of the church, and barely, if ever, was backed by members of the guild to this degree. The adventurer Izuku, and his party members, will face no penalty from the adventurers' guild. Luna said with finality. Then, she turned to look intently at the young druid. However, they will be advised to not act so rashly in the future. Quests are sanctioned for a reason, and jumping blindly into such situations could easily lead to more trouble than what they solve. Keel chuckled at this turnout. Happy to at least find one person with a modicum of common sense. Izuku smiled at the busty attendant, nodding in acceptance, and knowing in his heart that there was no way he would comply if people were in danger again. If you won't penalize his vandalism. The voice of an elderly man resounded, then we will do so. The gathered people parted ways to show the figure of an elderly man clad in ceremonial robes. I'm sorry. I tried to stop him, to explain. Darkness was now standing by Izuku's side. She looked utterly distressed. I'm sorry. For once, I agree with you, old geezer. A woman added. She was dressed in ceremonial robes too, but hers looked more exotic, fit more for the owner of a brothel and not for a religious leader. Our poor followers are going to suffer now that we cannot get any money from maintaining the seals of that dungeon. How do you intend to make up for it? The goddess Aqua may be forgiving, but if you make her children suffer, you can expect justice to rain down upon your head. Izuku found it very hard to not let go of Liza's hand. He was looking at the leaders of the local churches of Eris and Aqua, and he really wanted to have a word with them. I oppose. Darkness suddenly shouted, surprising Izuku, as he never expected her to go against her church. Izuku has not only done nothing wrong, none of his actions have gone against Eris' teachings. Darkness elaborated, unknowingly gaining a lot of appreciation from the green-haired teen. Nay. His actions are all our goddess would want each and every one of us to do. Upon opening her heart, Darkness found really hard to stop. While Izuku was the exact opposite of who she considered her soulmate, someone willing to indulge in carnal pleasures and give her all the pain and humiliation she so desired, he was the embodiment of what a saint was. Izuku is a kind-hearted man. Someone willing to help those in need, to heal the sick and the injured without seeking repayment. To protect the weak, to bring hope, even when no one asks him to do so. Darkness' voice had taken a tone that was just as serious as it was devoted. A man like him cannot be denounced as evil. A man like him deserves nothing short of being called a saint. Izuku found himself blushing really hard at all that praise, doubly so as Megumin lightly elbowed him while Chika nodded at him, making it clear she agreed with all the things being said. Unfortunately, the religious groups didn't seem to agree. And yet, he is nothing but a heathen. The elder man rebuked, contempt written on his features. How can he be a saint when he does not worship Eris? Nor does he worship our lovely goddess Aqua. The woman added, showing a stare that told how little she thought of the druid before her. Perhaps he should tell us who he worships, then we could properly judge his actions then. Izuku may have zero knowledge about religion in this world, but he was no fool. These people were baiting him into escalating things, so they could find a way to turn him into some sort of villain. Not that he deemed their groups as worthy of staying in good terms with in the first place. No one. Izuku plainly replied, surprising everyone in the hall, I don't see the goddesses coming down to help the people in need, nor their followers portraying kind and caring goddesses to the masses. There were a lot of gasps. Most people found the words painful yet true. While Eris was portrayed as a benevolent goddess, her followers often showed strict procedures when delivering this kindness, leaving little but breadcrumbs for those who weren't part of the faith. The Axis cult was full of zealots and weirdos, so there was little to argue there. To treat the sealing of undead as a business, to basically ransom the survival of the civilians, is nothing but shameful greed. If this is what your goddesses teach as being good, then I want no part in your religion. Izuku explained, making a certain thief girl flinch at her table. Besides, I'm not a member of any of your churches, you cannot judge me. Of course we can judge you, silly boy. The woman replied, mockery filling her voice. The goddess Eris teaches us benevolence. So it falls upon me to dictate the price of your redemption. The elder man spoke, passing judgment. First, you have to properly deal with that filthy creature that follows you, making sure she can't fly in Eris-blessed sky. Second, you are to donate 1 million Eris to the church. Only then we'll open our services to you again. Until then, you can't enter our church, much less have your friends ask us to revive you. If the man wanted Izuku to feel pressured to comply, he failed miserably. Izuku found the requests idiotic, and the supposed reward underwhelming. He wasn't going to allow Chika to lose a single feather she wasn't willing to give anytime soon, much less hurting her in any way, shape, or form. Eris surely is benevolent, no doubt the result of her church being well funded. The woman stated, not failing to show some envy in her voice. The Axis Church, however, feels the need to further punish this travesty, as our funding largely depended on keeping those seals working. So, we demand you part with 10 million Eris, and to grow one of those golden trees at our temple. Izuku did the only thing he could do at the moment, the only action fit for this situation. So, Izuku started, turning away from the zealots, and paying attention to more important people. How is the registry going, Keel? All the priests in the room gasped again at the scene, their importance being completely ignored. Then snorts followed suit, as many adventurers found the scene amusing. They were worried, of course, as not having the backing of a church meant no revival if the worst happened. Then again, they were talking about fucking Izuku, the arch-druid, slayer of Beldia, tamer of Gatorkin, and now, redeemer of liches. Surprisingly well, my friend. Keel happily replied, not only showing his adventurer card, but motioning his followers to do the same. Despite the shock and distress, this professional lady surely knows how to keep working. Luna looked pale and conflicted. She obviously turned to auto mode to work while her brain tried to deal with the horrendous situation unfolding before her. I got to be an alchemist. Sasha happily added. Izuku was happy for them, and that happiness gave him the required strength to keep Liza in check. Her scales had grown thicker, rougher. Her muscles, usually bulky and strong, had gotten steel-like. She was raging, and no one else had taken notice of the insanely dangerous situation. One of the younger priestess decided that the druid had been rude enough, and a slap was in order. Her first step was promptly blocked by Darkness, who had taken her shield into a defensive position. Megumin gripped her staff, and Chika tensed, ready to jump and sink her talons into the first one to attack her beloved master. Ila was conflicted between jumping in to defend her party leader and feign ignorance, and Yunyun began to prepare the light of saber. There was no way she would miss a confrontation against the church. I'm looking for the arch-druid, Izuku Midoriya. A voice, authoritative and feminine, suddenly filled the guild hall. It belonged to a beautiful woman clad in a blue official uniform and glasses. Her posture screamed official royal business, and the iconography she carried demanded respect. That's me. Izuku replied, tightening his grasp on Liza, who looked ready to start ripping off heads due to the amount of people insulting her master. Anything I can help you with? Internally, Izuku was screaming. Today had started good, even the sudden rescue mission ended up being more like meeting new friends. Then the city decided he was in the wrong for saving others. Now he was fighting the urge to just drop everything and live in the wilderness, with the added stress of the possibility of having to fight his way out. You have done enough already. The woman stated before she took a parchment out of her satchel, for the service of slaying Beldia, general of the Devil King's army, and protecting the lives of Axel's citizens. His Majesty has declared that you, and those who aided you in this heroic feat, are to be rewarded the full bounty for this enemy of mankind. 800 million Eris. Additionally, you are to be exempt for having to pay road tolls so you may travel across the kingdom, free to continue your heroic crusade. There was a pregnant silence as the woman made a dramatic pause to allow one of her escorts to hand over a platinum plate to a bewildered Izuku, who felt a little guilty for thinking that there were only ungrateful morons governing the kingdom. It even took him some time to finally understand that the platinum plate was like a banknote for the bounty he just earned. The golden stick that accompanied it, the size of a school pencil, was actually the proof of his rite of passing. Izuku was at a loss. He had never been awarded anything in his life, and this felt like he expected to feel as if he had passed the UA entrance exam, one step closer to being a hero. Thank you. If you want to thank me, and His Majesty, then continue to serve the kingdom. The woman replied, giving a small smile toward the archdruid, and staring at the hand he was using to keep the gator girl in check. If you can keep that brute calm, I'm sure that taking the heads of at least another 2 generals is within your capabilities. Izuku had to bite back a curse. He hated being reminded of how these idiots saw Chika and Liza as little more than animals, which was ironic considering they were more human, smart and wiser than the vast majority of the morons living in this world. With that being out of the way, the woman declared, making it obvious that Izuku was free to go. Luna, prepare the documentation for the closure of the temple to the goddess Aqua. What? Those belonging to the Axis cult shrieked at the news. Izuku was surprised too, but he decided that rewarding Liza for not killing anyone was more important now, just as hugging Megumin to find comfort, and petting Chika because she had been truly supportive. For his part, Keel decided that he had heard enough talk about religion to last another 100 years, so he took his people to an unoccupied table and ordered food, a lot of it, as if to sate hundreds of years of hunger. House hunting could wait a few more hours, maybe even days. Lady Senna, is this all right? Luna was honestly confused. She saw the request for funding completed long enough ago for the tribute to reach the capital. They requested funding, and the request was completed. The capital treasury has yet to receive the 10 million heiress they owe. Senna coldly stated, surprising everyone in the room, although for reasons different from what the agent thought. We've already waited for 10 years, but, if you have proof that the tax was sent already, I'll be willing to wait for confirmation. Murmurs and whispers quickly rose around the hall. Senna caught some of them, and was unsurprised to learn that the head priest had requested far more than was needed, or that the worshippers thought said head priest had sent the money already. Here is the document of the completed request. Luna showed the document, but the agent didn't even glance at it. Then? Senna spoke, her cold demeanor showing how she expected this to play out. Where is the tribute? We offered to keep it safe here, but the head priest insisted on keeping it inside the church, and deliver it himself. Luna knew very well how this was going to end, hence why she had prepared an ironclad defense. We also offered to transport the money and goods, but that was refused too. The head priest insisted that he himself, with the aid of a select group of crusaders, would carry out the delivery. Izuku didn't need a crystal ball to know what had happened. The head priest had run away with the money. He didn't found the strength to say, told you so, though. He was mentally tired, physically exhausted, and the idea of cuddling with Megumin and his girls was getting too strong to be ignored. He was sure they needed the cuddles too. I see, the guild is not at fault then. Senna replied with a cute voice, and then returned to her all-business mode. Start the paperwork, the sooner we get this done with, the better. As Luna began to fill out the reports and documentation required, the priests exploded in a myriad of voices. Those belonging to Eris openly mocked the misfortune of Aqua's followers, condemning them for having thieves leading them. The ones belonging to Aqua quickly began to plead for mercy. Senna didn't have any such thing in her heart though. Unless you show me the 10 million Eris owed, I'm closing the building by sunset. Senna stated, giving the cultists the cold shoulder. She had reasons to be this cold though, and not only because she worshipped Eris. The only man she ever wanted to marry had been tricked by a shameless harlot from that cult, forcing him to enter said cult and marry the girl or have his honor tainted forever. She had made her personal mission to see those psychos isolated from honest people who wanted to live normal lives. The cries for help didn't last long though. Hey, didn't that druid just receive a lot of money? Izuku wished to be able to teleport. He really didn't want to be in the middle of this fiasco. He was willing to even not demand his money back if he could get away right now. Master Izuku. The woman that had condemned him not 10 minutes ago made a complete shift, showing a cute smile and sparkles in her eyes. I know we started off on the wrong foot, but if... Izuku almost let go of Liza's hand. His mind had suddenly told him that these people would be much more worthy as fertilizer than as humans. That Liza wouldn't be a villain by taking off the heads of what amounted to leeches. But his heart reminded him that he wanted to be a hero, and heroes saved lives, not took them away. That heroes only fought for peace, not for personal gain or for revenge. Darkness intervening helped him to not slip in his anger. Stop! Darkness demanded, stepping in the way of the archpriestess, blocking her path. Are you really going to demand money from him? After condemning him for doing what is right? Do you have no shame? Most would agree that Aqua's followers didn't know shame, but then again, begging for money after talking so much shit was a new low. Darkness. Izuku called to the blonde crusader, earning everyone's attention. May I ask of you to deal with this? I'm tired of this stupidity, and I rather spend my time and money on those I love. That being said, join us at Wiz's shop after you finish with this. You also deserve some appreciation. Izuku gave a cute smile to the Crusader, who felt her heart skipping a beat. Maybe it wasn't too late for her? Of course, Izuku. Darkness replied in a rather dutiful way, really happy to be relied upon. I'll make sure to deal with these people in the proper way. With a final reassuring nod, Izuku, Megumin, Yunyun, Liza and Chika left the hall, leaving a confused ranger to aid a now imposing-looking Crusader. Lady Senna. Darkness called the agent in a very formal way, one that the woman recognized as being part of the nobility. Lady Dustiness Ford. Senna greeted back, well aware of how much this Crusader ridiculously outranked her. I would like to report the theft of 50 million heiress. Darkness stated, making Luna flinch, these people took this money from my party, and since they didn't use it for the purpose they stated, it is within my rights to demand reparations. Aqua's followers began to sweat, and Luna felt her heart starting to fail. The guild had a strict policy of sacrificing the attendants that were involved whenever nobles demanded reparations, which means that she was in a very real danger of not only losing her job, being forced into indented servitude to pay such outrageous amount of money. Then she remembered who she would be serving, and the dread decreased, dramatically so. Of course, Lady Dustiness Ford. Senna immediately agreed, a wicked smile adorning her features. It will be an honor to ensure that these thieves get proper punishment for taking from a noble, and for fooling the guild with their lies. As Luna sighed in relief, thanking the earth spirits for allowing her to keep her job, she began to think in ways to ask Izuku to stay in town. An endeavor that seemed impossible now, because the Church of Eris had decided to alienate who was the best adventurer this branch of the guild ever had. This is why you don't bite the hand that feeds you. Keel said to his followers, who admittedly felt angry at the idiots that verbally attacked who they considered to be a saint, or a god visiting their world. Omake, a shattered dream, for Henry B. Wiz, the shopkeeper, was a beautiful woman, and one of the greatest attractions of the city of Axel. Her beautiful body, kindness, and bubbly attitude made her quite popular with novice and veteran adventurers alike. Many teenagers would enter her shop for the sole purpose of ogling her, and lesser nobles liked to visit her in order to find magic items fit to decorate their homes. She was a woman with secrets though. While everyone knew she was a klutz with no talent for business, only a select few knew she wasn't human. Those who knew this startling truth were either her friends, or had a lot of interest in keeping such a secret safe. This is not what we agreed upon. Wiz hissed at a full body-sized mirror. Why did you allow Beldia to attack the city? A lot of innocents could have died. The ornate mirror was not showing her reflection. It was pitch black, sans a pair of glowing red eyes staring back at her. Beldia acted on his own. The figure on the other side replied, lacking any level of concern, his actions alone do not break our contract. Wiz wanted to scream. She had joined the Devil King not because she believed his ways were better, or because she shared his ideals. She joined in order to prevent deaths. As long as she kept powering the barrier surrounding his castle, he would not kill innocents. Now she learned that words could be twisted, and that she had been too naive. Does this mean that as long it's not your hand doing the killing, it is all right? Wiz asked through clenched teeth, allowing her temperament to show, a shadow of the Ice Witch of old. Is this what it means to honor a pact in your eyes? If she could, she would defect from the forces of the Devil King and be done with it. But her situation was unique. Her phylactery was hidden in a location known only to the Devil King, meaning that she had to comply until killed in the line of duty. If she died, she would just die with no returning, the phylactery would break, and that would be it. But if she quit, the Devil King would surely break the phylactery, which would mean that her soul would be forfeit, and the curse she shouldered would kill her former friends. She was trapped. So says you, who withheld information about such a dangerous adventurer. The Devil King shot back, making Wiz flinch. Did you really thought I wouldn't learn about this insanely powerful archdruid? How he destroyed one of my best generals with ease? Or that you were aware of his existence long before this incident happened? Wiz started to break down. He was talking about Izuku. She knew he was special the day she met him, but that was because his eyes shone with kindness, and his soul resonated so preciously. She never thought he would be so proficient in battle, and perhaps she really forgot to mention later on that he was able to easily defeat who was previously reported as a potential hero. Now she hated herself even more. Because of her, Izuku was in the sights of the Devil King. Leave Izuku alone. Wiz hissed, fully returning to her frightening persona of the Ice Witch. Just as she still berated herself for her old party members being cursed all those years ago, she knew she would never forgive herself if Izuku was hurt because of her. A dark chuckle echoed inside the shop. The Devil King seemed thoroughly amused. A powerful spellcaster, who is an enemy of the goddesses, and loves demi-humans. The Devil King had switched to a rather jolly attitude. Oh my, perhaps I should invite him for a cup of tea, and maybe offer him my own daughter. Wiz had had enough. She didn't know if the Devil King was serious, or if he was just messing with her, but she knew that her previous sacrifice had been in vain. I'm done dealing with you. Crash. Without a second thought, she broke the mirror, the artifact that connected her to the Devil King. If she weren't an undead, she would be shedding tears of grief. She couldn't betray the Devil King, at least not directly. Her only hope was to offer her life to Izuku, for if he killed her, the barrier would weaken, and her friends would be safe. Whiz! Izuku's voice filled the room as he entered the shop. Eyes full of determination, full of worry for her. Now the clumsy shopkeeper needed to find the courage and the proper time to reveal the truth to her precious friend. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub and share.